What's the most obnoxious reason an employee had to GTFO? Had a guy who we hired who showed a lot of potential in sales. He was a little arrogant and had a good-sized ego, but wasn't enough of a problem. He was very good at his job, and eventually it went to his head. He started showing up late all the time, leaving early, cutting corners where he could. The final straw came when he showed up late and someone spoke up to him about it. He decided the best choice of words he could yell were, "I make the most sales and I have the biggest Johnson, so you can all F off." He was fired on the spot. The customers thought it was pretty funny though. In his defense, if he was making more sales with half the amount of time and meeting quotas, I don't know if I would have cared, but I would have fired him for saying that, so whatever. Yeah, we do let something slide when someone's sales are up, but this wasn't something we could excuse. A pawn shop employee stole $400 from the cash register, then realized that there were video cameras. He had no idea where the security footage was stored, so in order to cover his tracks, he set the store on fire. He actually ended up pretty badly burned in the process and went to jail right after the hospital. I used to own a bakery, and a woman quit because she blamed her yeast infection on a bad batch of yeast I bought from China. I might be a guy, but I don't think that's how yeast infections work. I think she might have just been trying to get a rise out of you. The company I work for is a contractor for a giant corporation, and we go to different stores to do work. This new guy we hired seemed normal at first, but it turned out he was a complete frickin' moron. So, one day he goes on site with one of the senior employees to shadow him. This genius thought that because we worked for a giant corporation, we could just eat anything off the shelves and from the refrigerators for free. Well, the employee saw this and was like, "What the frick are you doing? You need to pay." And the manager comes. This guy then started fighting with the manager, then got in his car afterwards and drove off. Needless to say, his butt was fired the next day. We hired somebody to do video and photo media work. After a certain point, he felt it was selling out and didn't want to do media commercially. He wanted to do business stuff. We asked him which role he'd like. If he picked his role, we'd try it out. If he didn't, he'd quit. He decided to quit. He couldn't come up with a role. Medical clinic. An employee told a patient he wants to know what she tastes like. Doesn't get much worse. Not many exit interviews start with, "We really hope that was just you hitting on her, but we're going to inventory the samples just in case." Ugh, I hadn't even thought that the gentleman in question actually does legitimately have the means to consume parts of his patients if that was actually his goal. Gross. I used to manage a store in the mall. One of my employees, I'm pretty sure, was cheating on her husband with a mall security guard. I'd come by on my days off and he'd scurry out in a fluster. I never mentioned it, but the guy was coming by all the time to the point it was keeping her from doing her job. Finally, we had a work meeting and I said in a very non-accusatory way to everyone something like this. "I know it gets slow in here during the week and I'm guilty of it myself, but from now on I need everyone to keep personal visits to a minimum during your lunch break." This one lady stands up and starts screaming at me. How dare I accuse her? I'm a B-word. She quits. She continued to call me and leave me long aggressive rants on voicemail for a while as well. Tool and die shop owner here. One of our machinists would go out for lunch and slam back 3 or 4 beers every day. When I found out, I told him he can't drink beer at lunch. He said it was his personal time and what he did at lunch was his business, not mine. The next day, he came back from lunch smelling like beer and I let him go on the spot. A few years later, he showed up at my office asking for his old job back. He said he was an alcoholic back then and was sorry for his behavior. He was now sober and needed a job. I hired him on the spot and it worked out great for 5 or 6 years. Then he started drinking again and I had to let him go a second time. I have no idea how he's doing now, but I often wonder. He was a great machinist and a nice guy when he was sober. This lady was using the company FedEx to deliver purses for her Etsy job. We had an employee who had been fired and it was one of those really contentious firings and he was physically removed from the building. After he was fired, he used the company FedEx to deliver his eBay sales. The company brought charges against him. It wasn't 1 or 2 sales here and there. He had a whole huge operation and was shipping out more than 20 shipments a week. I guess he thought it was too big a corporation for anyone to be reviewing the FedEx bills. Which was true until one of the big executives hired on a family member and we had to find something for them to do. I worked for a boutique hotel. You know, small, cute, expensive as frick. I was an ops manager. Basically, unless the area manager had to come in, I was the law. I got a frantic call on my downtime from an employee claiming our overnight guy tried to attack him. I gave a sigh, as the guy freaking out is notorious for being a drama queen. I load up the security camera on my home PC, go to the time frame, and holy crap, our night guy legitimately lunged at his coworker and tried to strangle him. Luckily, a desk was between them, and that gave the victim time to bolt. Instantly, I felt like a jerk for doubting him. Well, this is when I call the area manager. We show up at the butt crack of dawn and speak with the guy who made the attack, and he claims he didn't do it. We show him the video, and I crap you not, he responds with, "I don't recall the events of that evening." We fired him on the spot. What started the fight, you ask? Well, the victim had done extra work to make the attacker's shift easier. The attacker felt like this was an insult to his work ethic. Oh, and I got multiple reference requests from him from similar hotels asking for a good reference. I simply said I wasn't able to provide a positive reference, as legally that was all I could say. Years ago, like in the 90s, my husband worked for a small company. He did a little bit of everything, and one of his jobs, along with a coworker, was keeping all the computers running. Now, this was a sales-based company, so all of the salespeople had laptops for themselves. If there was an issue or problem, they'd bring them in to be looked at. So one day, one of the non-local sales guys was in for a meeting. He said, "Hey, my computer is running really slowly. Can you take a look at it?" My husband says, "Yeah, sure, no problem." Sales guy leaves the computer and goes to whatever meeting he was off to. My husband and his colleague take a look and see that the hard drive is nearly full and figured that was slowing things down. They dig deeper and see the computer is filled with adult movies, like filled with it. Material of all sorts. Nothing illegal per se, but very close to it. Now, mind you, the salespeople have signed an agreement that their assigned computer was for business use only, not personal use. So we have a slight problem here. My husband and his colleague, not wanting to make a mountain out of a molehill, and not wanting the guy to lose his job over a fixable problem, just wiped the drive clean, reformatted it, got things set up again, and the computer was working great. The guy comes back the next day and my husband goes, "Hey, Mr. Sales Guy, we took a look at your computer. It was running slowly because the disk was nearly full with personal files, so we wiped it clean, reformatted things, and you're good to go. You know, just a reminder that our company-issued computers are for business use only. If you're looking for something for personal use, here are some relatively inexpensive laptops with a lot of storage space. You can put whatever you want on them. Small investment for privacy, you know?" And with that, they gave him a printout list of some good, reasonably priced laptops he could purchase for himself. The sales guy just kind of mumbled something, grabbed his computer, and was on his way without so much as a thank you. Well, the guys figured that was that, but guess who was back 6 weeks later with a not working at all computer? Yep, same idiot. Problem? Yep, computer was filled again with adult movies. They were done at this point. The two of them went straight to the president's office, showed her what was on the computer, well enough to give her an idea, and explained what had happened previously. She was a very no-nonsense lady, so needless to say, by 3 p.m. that afternoon, that sales guy was no longer employed. What an idiot. Oh boy, they really gave this guy every warning they could give him without directly telling him, "Don't have videos of people doing the nasty on your work computer," and he still didn't get it, or didn't care enough to stop. Stupid either way, my dude. About a year ago, I hired a guy who was down on his luck. Went against my best judgment. Due to the nature of my business, I usually don't hire people that fit his profile. He was out of shape, poor hygiene and stuff, and it wasn't long before I started hearing complaints from female employees and clients. Turns out he'd often attempt to flirt with women, and when turned down, he'd lose his mind and call them terrible names and insults. I don't tolerate that crap, so I gave him a very stern warning. The very next day, I found one of my sweetest female employees visibly upset. Upon inquiring, she said that this idiot had followed her home yesterday to make sure she got home safely. Then he showed up in the morning to escort her to the office. She was genuinely scared. I called him into my office and told him to scram. He threatened to file a complaint with the Department of Labor for discrimination against men who have an innate need to protect women. It didn't matter. I told him to beat it, and now I'm fighting the stupidest claim ever with the Department of Labor. I used to do some consulting work and hired a woman to help out. Mostly clerical stuff and whatnot. I flew down to St. Thomas for a meeting and got a call from Sonatrol at 10:30 p.m. She had keys to my building but didn't know about the alarm. Basically, she and her boyfriend brought another couple down to have a menage a four in one of my offices that I'd converted to a bedroom where I could crash if I worked late. So I called her. She answered mid-deed and acted normal, albeit a little tipsy. I talked about a few mundane details I needed to relay to her anyways, and then mentioned to make sure she was only ever at the office between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. since there was a silent alarm that would call me with audio activities in the building. When I got back to town, her keys were sitting on my desk. I fired a guy because he said he couldn't come to work because it was raining and he'd just washed his car the day before. Had a guy on location fake an injury. Now, mind you, he did injure himself severely, accidentally, but that wasn't his plan. His plan had been to fake a minor injury and get put on workers' comp. The problem was he screwed up how to do it and ended up hurting himself way worse. You ask, how did he know he was trying to fake injure himself? Well, that's very easy to explain. We had a 20-minute tape of him hiding behind one of the trucks on the worksite practicing his fall. Then a written confession from friends saying he'd been planning it since the day we hired him. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not my business, but my dad's. He hired predominantly people with criminal records, and literally all they had to do was inspect rental cars for damage as the cars left the lot and keep their noses clean. You could do pretty much anything you wanted on your downtime with no complaints from my dad as long as he didn't get any complaints from the owners of the car lot. One day, one of the supervisors from the lot I worked for walks out and asks me for my dad's number. The supervisor had caught a guy stealing gas from the property. He even had security camera footage of it happening. The guy was instantly fired. It didn't stop him from trying to give other people with troubled backgrounds a second chance, though. One of my dad's best friends of 30+ years and his brother were both ex-cons and struggled to get jobs. Plus, with the exception of this guy, they were all super reliable and gave him no problems. Everyone with no record, me probably being the only exception, gave my dad a ton of problems and weren't as reliable. He and his ex-cons worked well until the business went under many years later. At a previous job, we had issues with food being stolen from the Breakroom fridge. The company made a big stink about it, and it kept happening, so they very obviously installed security cameras in the Breakroom. Like big frickin' cameras in plain sight pointing at the fridge, with our bosses being very direct about it. There is the camera. You really want to lose your job over eating someone's sandwich? A few days later, my guy gets fired for stealing food again. Literally on camera, just grabbing people's lunch out of the fridge and eating it then and there. I work on employee claims and lawsuits. I've told this story on here before. A guy filed a discrimination complaint against the company after he got fired for stealing hot dogs from the refrigerator. This warehouse, big company, this wasn't at my location, they kept a stock of hot dogs for employee appreciation picnics, usually weekly cookouts. Nobody knew why they were disappearing, so announcements were made and all employees were asked to not eat the hot dogs, and if they wanted some they could ask, but couldn't have several packs. That didn't work, so warnings were announced. Finally, a camera was installed near the fridge and he got caught red-handed. He was practically inhaling the hot dogs directly from the fridge by the packet. After he was fired, he filed a discrimination claim on the basis of disability due to his weight. I sent the response with a video of him eating the hot dogs. Also, he couldn't prove his weight was a disability under the AIDA, and weight is not a protected class. We won that claim. My dad owned his own business working as a color corrector and editor. He had this one employee who'd been there since day one and ended up being similar to an assistant manager. My dad owned that company for more than 10 years and just recently he had to fire that assistant manager guy because apparently he was telling employees and customers that my dad hates gays, people who aren't white, his kids, his whole family, and that he's just a terrible person. Basically driving all business away, pushing my dad's company towards bankruptcy. Turns out this employee was basically just a narcissistic sociopath. My dad was just sad his employees never trusted him enough to tell him about what this guy would say to them. A guy threw a hammer at another guy for changing the radio station. Look, we've all wanted to do this kind of thing before, right? When someone changes the radio or leaves the door open or keeps sniffing too loudly, right? You just can't act on those intrusive voices, folks. Wait, we all have those urges though, right? My employee had a corporate card, charged a vacation, purse, fossil watch, takeout, and she was racking up all this evidence along with actually just being miserable to work with. She had a laptop, quote, stolen within weeks of joining our company. I fired her, and a few days later, a watch catalog from Fossil showed up at the office with her name on it. We have an active court case for all the theft. The one that instantly leaps to mind was the woman who was fired day 2 of a call center training course because she just wouldn't stop having a good time with herself, if you know what I mean. It was really somewhat sad. She was late 30s or early 40s, and I don't think this was an employment scam or anything like that, and more likely just a mental compulsion or substance use. It was not subtle, but done under a shawl or scarf thing draped over her lap. She was politely and quietly asked to stop by the trainer, and then stopped momentarily but started up again 15 to 20 minutes later. I am not sure how she got through HR screening. This was for a wireless phone company too, not a chat line or anything. Back when I had my translation business, I hired a guy to seek out contracts for me, and I'd pay him 20% finder's fee. Instead of sending the finished project to a client, he accidentally sent undressed pictures of himself, and I learned of it when my client forwarded me the mail half an hour later, including the multiple glorious shots of his trouser snake. I don't even. I had a subcontractor on a job for my company trying to convince the client that they should dump me and go with their business and that they'd undercut me by 10%. I learned this from the client, who asked me to find another person to service our contract. I knew somebody who had to take a substance test, so he bought a little sample jar of clean urine with him, went into the toilet, came out, gave the fake sample to whoever was doing the test, and got fired on the spot. The sample was ice cold. Fresh number 1 is hot. My wife's cousin worked with me and her father at our work, landscaping, for a couple of months. He had previous experience and we needed the help, so we hired him, despite warnings to the owner from my father-in-law that he was a complete jerk. To name a few things, we were putting fresh mulch in one of the industrial parks that we maintained, and he had me close the doors to the bed of the truck, after which he raised the bed so that all the mulch would slide to the back. Except the doors weren't designed for that kind of load and immediately sprang open. If they hadn't hit the ground while springing open, they would have royally screwed up the cars on either side of us. He then proceeded to call the owner of the company and tell him what happened, placing all the blame on me for, quote, not closing the doors right. We took him on a paver job and he insisted that he could cut pavers with our wet saw. Except he didn't use gloves, so the material from the pavers being cut, which includes some nasty stuff, absolutely destroyed the skin on his hands, and he called out for the next 2 days because he couldn't move his fingers. That was not the first time he had made that mistake. On the same paver job, which called for Belgium block to be installed along the driveway, he decided it would be a great idea to mix the mortar and the sand for the base on the owner's freshly paved driveway and use it as he needed it. Except it rained the day he did this, and he ended up with a 3/4-ton block of what was essentially concrete in the middle of their, again, freshly paved driveway. On multiple occasions, we got reports from the grass-cutting crew that he went out with that he did nothing all day except sit in the truck, text his wife, and smoke. He thought he could get away with this because neither myself nor my father-in-law were with him. Eventually, he was fired, and we got a couple of extremely nasty but entertaining phone calls from his wife, calling all of us some choice names while vowing that we were no longer part of his family. My dad and I ran a business together cleaning out foreclosed homes for a real estate agency as I was finishing high school. I was a senior, so I got out at lunchtime, and we could usually get a house done in half a day. Sometimes we'd get some real bad ones, and we had a few guys would call in to see if they wanted to make a quick $100 for a day's work. On my literal last day of class, my dad picked up one of our usual guys and got the house done about 90% by lunch. He was a pretty normal guy that we never had any trouble with. The guy we paid to help my dad went out to his truck and came back into that house with a 9mm and robbed my dad at weapon point of his wallet and took his keys and left in our truck. The funny thing is, my dad only had the cash he was about to give him an hour later for finishing up the house. The state police got the guy's number from us, and they told him some bogus story about how my dad was being investigated for not paying his workers, and if he met the police with the truck, they'd get his statement and let him go. The idiot pulls up and gets arrested on the spot. He got 8 years in prison. That has to be a contender for dumbest criminal, right? If you steal a car and get a call from the popo saying, "Hello, can you bring that exact truck you happen to have to us for an unrelated matter?" you should be abandoning it or fleeing the state. We had a young IT intern helping us with some hardware inventory tasks. It wasn't uncommon for laptops not to make it back to us, as projects would hoard them from terminated employees. But one day, we noticed his backpack open and a laptop of a model we used sticking out. Sent him to the other side of the building and checked the serial number, and yep, it was one he reported as missing during a recent inventory. Opportunistic theft is one thing, but bringing it back into the office every day? Just, wow. There was this one guy at my work, extremely nerdy, and this is from a self-admitting nerd, but this guy was absolutely obsessed with Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Literally the only things he would ever talk about, and would talk about them for as long as you'd let him. One day, I was on register and I saw him being dragged out of the store by cops in handcuffs. Turns out he'd been shoplifting tons of playing cards of those above-listed games. At least $500 worth, as our store policy was to let an employee get away with it up to that amount before busting them. I think because the charges stick harder or something. Not me, but my dad. His worker asked if he wanted to assist in making crystal. He no longer works for my dad. Also, him and his girlfriend got busted for making said crystal and are serving 5 years. My actual name is Skylar, but that doesn't mean that this is a Breaking Bad reference. Committing no notable offense, but faking incompetence or causing inconvenience in order to be fired and receive severance pay. Yes, I'm familiar with Better Call Saul and I love it, but as it turns out, and hold on to your seats for this, that being a jerk for money is not exclusive to that show. A new heavy mechanic was hired, claimed to have prior experience. He was hired because he had a kid on the way and was in a bad spot financially, and the owners had a soft spot for unlucky people. Within a week, his nickname was Almost. He almost did the work correctly. He almost rewired an electrical system. He almost rebuilt an air dryer successfully. He almost mounted tires. The probability of the part he rebuilt failing within a week was a solid 60%. By the end of week 2, it was clear most of his knowledge was book-learned and not real-world. They wouldn't let him do anything except change oil. Once his probation period was up and he showed no improvement or drive, they let him go. Trucks only make money when they move, and he could not keep them moving.
Doctors of Reddit, what's something you've had to tell a patient that you thought for sure was common knowledge? Have had to inform a few male patients that the condom only goes on the shaft and should not be pulled down to include covering of the testicles. How a shorter/fatter 5ml oral syringe held more volume than a skinnier and longer 1ml oral syringe. How does this hold more liquid when it's shorter? Also, I've seen almost every incorrect way to use an inhaler, upside down being fairly common. People taking birth control pills only on the days they have intimacy. I no longer assume anything as common knowledge. I'd rather have someone be offended that I explained something basic than to have something awful happen because I assumed the patient knew something. After putting a few stitches in a middle-aged guy's scalp, the family asked if he was okay. The attending joked that his brain was still inside. The family were stunned by this news. I, the medical student, spent the next half hour informing the family that the brain was inside the skull and that a person couldn't live without one. They thought that the brain was just a turn of phrase to reflect a person's common sense rather than an actual organ. Sort of the same as what they thought about the heart. I'm not a doctor, but I'm an ER nurse. I had a patient come in for an STD check. She was very upset and continued to tell me that she only had one partner. Progressing through my assessment, she further divulged that even if he was sleeping with other people, it shouldn't matter because he uses a condom every time and he makes sure to wash it thoroughly after every use. I asked what she meant when she said he washes it after every use. She explained that he washed the condom with hot water and soap before he used said condom again. I had to explain to her that condoms are a one-time use product. She had no clue. My dad is a family doctor in the States. A woman came in for a well baby check with their 6-month-old and she had what looked like chocolate milk in the baby's bottle, so he started explaining to her as kindly as he could that she shouldn't be giving her baby chocolate milk, at which point she interrupts him and says, "Oh, that isn't chocolate milk, it's coffee. He just loves it." If you're going to put it in your butt, make sure it has a flared base, or is attached to something you won't lose your grip on. Corollary, if you've already lost something in your butt, don't lie to the triage nurse and then medical team. While your story is usually amusing, we don't really care how it ended up in there. Pediatric nurse here. I've told more than one parent that their infant should not be drinking Dr. Pepper out of their bottle, or any other vessel for that matter. Viagra does not prevent STDs or pregnancy. Not a doctor, but a paramedic. During clinical time in the ER, 17-year-old came in with a bloody rectum/anus. Apparently, she wasn't wiping after using the bathroom and it was basically really bad diaper rash. So the nurse had to call social services and explain to this girl proper wiping. I'm a veterinary technician. I once had to explain to a client that the ticks she had been frantically trying to remove from her male dog's belly with tweezers were actually his nipples. I also told her she had an extremely well-behaved patient dog. Not a doctor, RN in the ICU. I've seen some really stupid people over the years, but a few weeks ago, a patient's family member got into a verbal altercation with me over the fact that I was trying to freeze his mother to death. He kept pointing to the digital thermostat displaying a temperature of 23 degrees Celsius, We're in the US, by the way. When I gently explained to him that 23 degrees Celsius is not at all cold, he just kept pointing to the display and shouting, "You don't think 23 degrees is cold? It's 23 freaking degrees in here!" and acting insane. After multiple attempts to explain to him what Celsius is by myself, the charge nurse, house supervisor, and security, we finally gave up and had him escorted out. He was a man in at least his late 30s who's graduated high school and had never heard of Celsius and Fahrenheit. He literally thought we were making it up in an attempt to conceal my efforts to freeze his intubated, critically ill mother to death. Slightly graphic warning. Another vet here. Dead bodies decompose. If you leave your dead dog I euthanized in the back of your car on the hottest day of the year, don't come crying to me when its belly fills with putrefying gases and bursts. Demanding I cover the costs of reupholstering your car might be considered a little rude as well. A hospital is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for medical emergencies. So the next time you have a stroke on Friday, come in on Friday and don't wait for the weekend to pass. A child cannot have inherited any genetic traits from someone the mother has previously been with. Only one man is the biological father. My wife and I were trying to get pregnant, and due to possible complications, we were talking to an obstetrician. Towards the end of the visit, he tells us in all seriousness, "Just so you guys know, you have to stop using condoms if you want to get pregnant." We just stare at him a bit and say, obviously? And he just shakes his head and says, "You'd be surprised. There's been a few couples that really didn't realize that." My grandmother was the ignorant one getting in explaining. She was 18 and in labor with her first child. She was the kind of lady to wear pants in the late 40s. The nurse looked her up and down and told her to put on the labor clothes. So she took off her top and bra and got on the bed. The nurse is really confused. "Take off your pants too." "Why? It comes out my belly button, right?" asked Grandma. "No, darling, it comes out the way he came in." ER nurse here had to explain to a 27-year-old female that this bleeding she was having for a week every month was normal and why. She had 2 children, by the way. My mother is a nurse and has been for over 25 years. The only story of hers that makes me sick is the story of a man who could not afford Viagra. So he reasoned his cock gun should do the trick, right? It'd stay in there and keep him ready. So he put the tip of the gun in his urethra and filled himself up. Long story short, don't do that. Don't, for Christ's sake, ever do anything even remotely like that. Podiatrist buddy told me this one. Lady has to have foot amputated and is given waiver forms to sign pre-op. Buddy asks if she needs time to think about it. She's very nonchalant and doesn't seem to care much what they do. He gets suspicious and probes a bit as to why she's not more concerned. She says she gets that they have to operate and it's okay because the foot will grow back. He then has to explain she's not a salamander. Things get a bit more serious. Okay, but like salamanders are cool? Imagine if we could regrow our limbs like salamanders. That'd be sick. Not a doctor, but a nutritionist. I work with a lot of different patients, and I have tons of stories about food stupidity. Had a lady have bariatric surgery. Your stomach gets surgically stapled smaller. And her mother kept trying to force her to eat real food the day of the surgery when she was on a liquid diet. She would eat it, puke, rip her stitches out, repeat. We had to ban the mother from seeing her because she would literally blackmail and guilt trip this poor lady into eating a whole pizza, barf it all up because her poor post-surgery stomach couldn't handle it, and end up ripping out stitches and causing enormous pain because her mother was positive that she would die if she was on a liquid diet for a couple days. Another lady I was seeing for clinicals was diabetic, and she would come in every week with stupid high blood sugar levels, 250 to 260-ish. Not knowing why they were so high, she kept a record of everything she ate, and all of her food intake seemed fine. One day, her husband came with her, which was weird, and he ninja slipped me a note while shaking my hand. It read, "Ask her about the Quick Trip slushies. She doesn't believe me that they have sugar in them." So I asked her if she was having any soda, lemonade, tea, ice cream, shakes, or slushies, and she told me, like a light bulb had gone off in her head. "Well, I have been drinking about 3 of the 48-ounce Quick Trip slushies every day for a while now. They're just so good. And they aren't food or drink, they're slushies. So they don't have any sugar in them, and I don't need to record them." It was so hard to convince her that those are so full of sugar it isn't even funny. But seriously, 3 a day on a type 2 diabetic? It was one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. A nursing home called 911 for a patient who was having difficulty breathing. When we arrived, a PA was standing in front of the patient, vigorously fanning the old lady with her hands. She looked at us and said, "I'm giving her some oxygen because we couldn't find a portable O2 tank," and keeps flapping her arms. Remember, this is a physician assistant, probably making $100,000 a year. I informed her that she could stop now, and my partner and I did our best to wait until we were outside to burst out laughing. Going off on a side tangent here, some people don't handle stress well. I volunteer as an emergency first responder, but one of the funniest cases I've seen of was out of uniform in an airport. A larger gentleman who suffered from COPD had taken a 6-hour flight. Upon getting through security, he had collapsed and was having difficulty breathing. The first person on scene to help the guy was a firefighter. I was second on scene, younger and smaller than the firefighter. I'm 6'3" and not skinny. This guy was just huge. So I'm letting him take lead as I run through making sure EMS is on the way, checking this guy's vitals, stabilizing his head and neck. Big guy, went from conscious to unconscious quickly and fell straight down, and getting a history from his family. In the meantime, the firefighter's kinda starting to panic a little. He may have been new, or just the fact that he was out of uniform and not expecting it threw him. Either way, as the man regains consciousness and I start running through a quick GCS test, which involves me and the gentleman talking to each other and treating for shock, the firefighter tries to retake the guy's vitals. He fails to find a pulse. Understand at this point I am communicating with the patient. He's not completely lucid, but he is speaking to me and groaning. Having failed to find a pulse, the firefighter assumes this gentleman is in full-on cardiac arrest and begins to attempt to apply an AED to his chest. I say attempt because, along with being large, this gentleman was somewhat hairy. Now, in any first aid course for anyone that involves teaching one to use an AED, one of the first things you cover is that the razor in the kit is there in case you need to shave someone. The firefighter, having failed to realize that talking probably means the patient isn't in cardiac arrest and that he is having trouble getting a pulse because the patient is larger, then fails to shave the guy's chest. This leaves the patient with the 2 contact pads hanging off of his chest hair, but very much not in any way contacting his skin, while I've just started to realize what the firefighter was trying to do. At that point, fortunately, an older woman arrives and identifies herself as a trauma nurse, who are, by the way, just about the best people to have on your side if something like this happens. She tells him to go talk to the family, takes lead, and everything goes smoothly from then until the airport medical folks show up and take over. Unfortunately, I'm having trouble not laughing the whole time at the image of the firefighter staring intently at an AED that can't possibly give him a reading on the condition of the now conscious and lucid patient. TLDR, even people who should know better sometimes lose it under stress. Had a lady measure her baby's temperature by preheating the oven and putting one hand in front of it while the other hand was on the baby's forehead. She told the nurse her baby's fever was about 250 degrees. Lady, you either think you're the Human Torch or you don't understand how conduction works. I had an old lady come in with a massive bleed in her brain. She was pretty much gone. I had to explain to her tearful son that there was nothing we could do. He said that he loved his mama and he'd give anything for her. So he asked us to give her his brain for a brain transplant. I actually was left speechless for a minute and then had to spend another 20 minutes explaining why that was not possible. Mom brought her kids to the ER after they ate all of their Halloween candy because they had tummy aches. They were still eating Reese's peanut butter cups when they were in the exam room. I had to explain to her that they need to cut back on the candy, and she looked at me like I had 3 heads. For almost a month, my friend had random pains. Bruises started showing up randomly. He looked ashen, and what we first thought was him being lazy was actually him not having any energy. Finally, his girlfriend got him to agree to go to the doctor, who sent him to the ER, where it took several doctors to figure out what was wrong, either because none of them had actually seen it in real life, or they didn't think someone could be that stupid. Quote the doctor, "You have scurvy. Eat a freaking orange." Ooh, I've got another one. Inhaler technique. So we're told to always show a patient how to take an inhaler if they are new to them, and that we should check technique every so often. Yeah, you think. How hard can it be? Well, my senior once noticed that a patient was getting repeat prescriptions for an inhaler every week rather than every month. We brought her in to find out why. Oh, it just doesn't seem to work very well. I press it up to 50 times and it doesn't help. We were in shock over this. Salbutamol inhalers taken in excess, we're talking like 10 puffs taken in an asthma attack, can give you a thumping headache, a tremor, and a dry mouth. How is she taking 50 and not noticing? We asked to see the technique. Yeah, turns out she was spraying it onto her chest. Internal face palms were had, and we educated her on how to take it properly. A PhD isn't that kind of doctor. Please don't show me that rash. During paramedic school, my teacher was a PA who told us a story of a lady that came into the clinic he was working at. She said she didn't feel well, nothing but general fatigue and not feeling right. He had the nurse do a standard set of vitals and a blood glucose. Her glucose was extremely high, so he goes in to talk to her. He asked, "Has anyone ever told you that you have diabetes?" She replied, "Yeah, a doctor said that I had that once and I took some medication for a couple weeks and felt better." He then had to explain to her that diabetes doesn't go away after some medication. I had the opposite happen to my wife. She was pregnant and had a thyroid nodule. We were concerned about how removal could affect the pregnancy due to changes in hormone levels and anesthetic during the surgery. We stated this concern quite clearly and in great detail. His response was that he will be operating on the neck and that it was nowhere near the baby. Thanks for answering a question we never had and ignoring ours. He was really pushing for surgery before delivery. We did not see him again. I work in a hospital lab. Quite a few years ago, there was a patient who was on our schedule for a semen analysis from one of our fertility doctors. The between the lines here is the patient was having some fertility problems. Patient presents us with a cup of urine. We explain that we need a semen sample, not a urine one. Confused why his first sample was rejected, he goes back to the private bathroom at the end of the hall. About half an hour later, he comes back with another urine sample, and that's when I literally had to have both a birds and bees talk with a man in his mid-30s and clue him in on the world of self-pleasure. This has actually happened twice now in my 8 years, and I found out about another guy when I was talking to my manager about it. The second time, I had a few thoughts. I could save these guys thousands of dollars by explaining how to have intimacy properly. Somehow, it never came up in the office that the wrong fluid is being used. I had to explain to a frantic mother that non-traumatic vaginal bleeding with abdominal cramps is normal in a 12-year-old. I tried to throw her a hint when I asked when the girl's last menstrual cycle was. She merely replied in hysterics, "She doesn't have menstrual cycles! She's only 12! I'll leave the diagnosis to your imagination. I'm a CNA at a nursing home. We got a new resident in and she had a huge bed sore near her tailbone region that had become infected and abscessed to the point that you probably could have fit a Coke can inside the opening. It had to be cleaned, packed, and have a wound pump attached to it every 12 hours. Turns out before she came to us, her family didn't think she needed any at-home help, so they would go over in the morning, get her up, bathe, dressed, put a Pop-Tart on the table for her, get her in her wheelchair, and go about their day. She was incontinent and would sit in the chair for 12 to 15 hours a day covered in her own urine and feces until they came back, wiped her off, and put her back in her bed for the night. Sitting all day in your own filth, it turns out, leads to bed sores. The day she was admitted to my facility, her family, my administrator, and everyone were all talking in a room. They had introduced us and let her know I'd be taking care of her at night from now on. She whispered to me that she needed to go to the bathroom, and I had to kick out my boss and her family because her son insisted that she can just hold it. She was never able to get over the raging infection in her wound, and it eventually killed her. It was one of those situations where I honestly wish I could have looked them in the face and told them, "You know you're the one that killed your mother, right? You killed her." Just as an update, yes, we tried to turn them in for elder abuse, but she was actually still sound of mind and realized what we were going to do. And so, she recanted her story and said she had never told us anything like that. She didn't want to see her son in jail for what he did to her, so she went to her death telling people things had just gotten out of hand and she was too weak. Paramedic here. Have informed numerous people that pouring Gatorade into the unresponsive diabetic's mouth is not a good idea. What you should do, call an ambulance. If they have a glucagon emergency kit, follow its instructions. Do not put anything in, on, near, or around their face. I've heard the powdered sugar and gums, etc., but if you expect an ambulance within 20 minutes, just lie them on their side and wait. Drink the Gatorade yourself. You deserved it. You just saved their freaking life. My mother who worked as a pediatric nurse. She had a mother whose child was putting on a startling amount of weight. This was bad since the patient's mother was obese and had diabetes, and they wanted to control weight gain for baby. So they went through the feeding schedule. Baby was due for a bottle during the checkup. The mother whips out a bottle during appointment. My mom is startled to see the milk is bright pink. She asks, why is the milk bright pink? The child's mother explains that her kid prefers the milk if it has strawberry quick mixed in and drinks more milk. The mom didn't get the connection between quick and weight gain. TLDR, don't feed your child the betas. It makes them fat from the start. IDOC here. Just today, I had to tell a patient that no, you should not attempt to continue wearing a contact lens that was dropped in the toilet. This is like a worse version of that eyeball licking trend from 2013, which actually turns out was a hoax. In a free medical clinic, I had to tell a mother that she should be brushing her 4-year-old's teeth. The daughter came because her throat hurt. After opening her mouth and using a tongue depressor to see her throat, the daughter squirmed like 4-year-olds are prone to do, and the tongue depressor hit her gums. Pus flowed everywhere, and the child wound up having to be put on penicillin before having every last tooth pulled due to severe infection. You should start brushing your infant's teeth as soon as they start teething, and do a gentle gum massage with the baby toothbrush before that. Use safe-to-swallow toothpaste before the child is 10. Let the child brush their own teeth as soon as they are able for practice, and then have an adult brush them at a 45-degree angle toward the gums in small circles. Children should be supervised brushing their teeth until they're at least 12 or longer if necessary. This occurred in Nicaragua, quite far from any major city, and wasn't reported because the mother did follow-up and kept the appointment for extractions. The thought of brushing her daughter's teeth simply never arose. Before modern toothbrushes were invented, people used bones, porcupine quills, sticks, and chew sticks. The ancient Romans had toothbrushes as well. Yes, you should brush your pet's teeth. Pet toothpaste only, no fluoride. No, I didn't murder the mother. She was provided with 6 months' worth of dental supplies for both of them and thoroughly educated on dental hygiene. Alright, now for the old switcheroo. My ex-mother-in-law was a pediatrician. However, her education was all from the 60s and 70s in Cold War Poland, and she hadn't practiced as a pediatrician for 30 years when our doctor was born. Like a lot of first-time parents, we read all of the books, and the vast consensus at the time was that the only thing babies need is mother's milk. So we set ourselves up for that, and the baby is thriving after a couple of weeks with our doctor telling us everything is fine. Mother-in-law comes to visit, and of course, we're doing everything wrong. We can't hold the baby right, we're being too attentive, we're not being attentive enough, she's too warm, she's too cold. I think you expect a certain amount of that, but then she starts insisting on giving the baby sugared black tea in a bottle. I'm not the smartest guy on the planet, but I'm smart enough to let the wife and her mom settle this between them. Lots of screaming back and forth. Showed her the literature from our doctor about nursing, all the references in the baby books, pulled down a couple of recent research articles, but the crazy old battle axe didn't give up. Finally, I caught her after we foolishly left her alone with the baby for a couple of minutes, trying to force her to take a bottle with tea in it. She yelled at my wife, "In a week, I will go back home and then you can do whatever you want with the baby." In a level voice, I told her, "That's what you don't seem to understand. We can do whatever we want with the baby right now." RN. Not an MD, but here's the story. Patient was a newly diagnosed diabetic who needed to be taught how to inject insulin. So the diabetes educator did the good old routine of taking an orange, drawing up insulin, then injecting it into the orange, then made the patient repeat it. Patient goes home, comes back in a week, and his blood sugar is out of control. They ask him if he's been taking his insulin, and he goes, "Of course." So they decide to ask him to demonstrate how he injects insulin. The patient goes, "Sure, I just need an orange." At this point, I started face-palming hard because I know where this one is heading. But of course, they got him an orange and a vial of insulin with the syringe. So the guy draws up the insulin correctly, takes the syringe, injects it into the orange, and then says, "And then I eat the orange." At this point, I had to walk out because I nearly lost myself right there. I once had a patient with a cancer diagnosis completely depressed about not being able to see their family anymore. I was confused because I had spoken with this individual's spouse and extended family who seemed supportive. There wasn't any indication of family problems. It turns out this individual thought genetic and family history had meant something similar to contagious, leading them to the conclusion that one should stay away from loved ones lest it be spread through the family. That was one clarification I was so happy to give. To those wondering how such a misunderstanding is possible, keep in mind that we ought not to judge. Not everyone has the benefit of a good education, nor is everyone part of a generation and culture that has always had medicine and science in their lives. Other times, language and jargon could be a barrier to understanding. I was not the physician that failed to communicate the issues effectively, but we were all glad that at least his problem could be easily dealt with.
What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've ever seen? I once had a mum ask if I could open up the back of our ambulance so her kid could see what was inside, since he wanted to be a firefighter. I'm a medic, not a firefighter. I agree as long as he doesn't touch anything. Of course, the second the door opens, the kid hops in and goes straight for our expensive monitor. I tell him no, that it's dangerous and could break, to which he starts screaming, "I don't care, my mum will buy it." And the mum says, "It's fine, just let him play with it. If it breaks, I'll replace it." I had to physically pick him up and carry him out of the ambulance, since she didn't even try to control him. While this is happening, we get paged out for a call, and this B-word suggests that she could pay double our hourly wage if we stay for a few more minutes so her little crap bag could explore/destroy more of our equipment. Get the flip on out of here with that crap, lady. You're willing to delay an ambulance so you won't have to deal with your precious little Joey's tantrum? Unbefrickin-leavable. Oh, that's a winner right there. Ignore your call, it's probably just a poor person anyway. This is what makes me want to punch strangers. Like, just slap the heck out of that woman about 9 times, and then tell the kid this could happen to anyone. Just shock them into reality. But mostly I'm just a mom that would be so frickin' proud of my kid growing up to work in an ambulance, helping others, and making a real difference. And then there's this witch making light of it like the boxy car with the loud siren and flashy lights is a disposable toy for her kid. My roommate refused to go with his family for spring break since there wasn't a flight with first-class seats and only business class was available. He ended up just taking a connecting flight that did have first class available, while the rest of his family just took business on the direct flight. Wouldn't exactly call it rich kid syndrome, but it took me a while to get used to my girlfriend's lifestyle. I grew up in a very working-class family with both my parents working full-time just for us to stay afloat. Went round to my girlfriend's house and saw a lady making food in the kitchen. "Oh, you must be Mrs. Surname," trying to be really polite and introduce myself to her family. That was actually their maid. Awkward. Luckily, they're all really down to earth and stuff, because turns out her parents were basically homeless and living out of storage space when they were my age. But her parents started up a little business that actually became successful enough to support them, and then just kept growing. Figures. People who come from humble beginnings often turn out to become decent people when, and if, they do get rich. I don't think it's too off the mark to say that most of the potential problems come from generations of wealth and complacence, even just one or two. The dude who relentlessly bullied me in school was also one of the richest people in the city. One day a teacher caught him with his hands around my throat and I was pinned against a wall. We were both taken to the teacher's meeting room where it was explained to me that we should try and get along and that we should apologize to each other. Did I mention his dad also built the flash new cafeteria for the school that year? He was caught on numerous occasions with me in some state of distress, and every time they found ways to make it both our problem. His dad pumped a lot of money into that school. He also flew his friends on private airline to Manchester United games, so nobody stood up for me because they could lose their privileges. My saving grace was a lot of his mates in early years of secondary school turned on him in later years because he was such a butthole. Man, clearly I'm not over it. Attended an international high school in Ho Chi Minh City, where a lot of new wave millionaires' kids live. The school was ridiculous. A third of the kids were expats, perfectly lovely kids. A third were local Vietnamese kids whose parents were working their butts off to send them to a private school, and the other third were these millionaire kids. They wouldn't ever hesitate to show off their mummy and daddy's wealth. They'd pull up to school in Lamborghinis, Ferraris, etc., and if their Rolls-Royce didn't come on time to pick them up after school, it would be a straight phone call to their other driver to, "Come pick me up right now." There'd be such pricks 24/7 to the non-rich locals, classist butt kids, and constantly just bringing up the most trivial things and complaining about them. I'm literally not exaggerating here when I say this. My maid brought me the wrong LV bag. I told her it was the tan brown one, not the light brown one. Ugh, I can't believe it. Now we have to send her on the jet to Shanghai to get it. They all paid and used family connections to get into Harvard, Stanford, UPenn, etc., and even now constantly complain on Facebook and Instagram about how crap their residence hall food was, so they just hired some freaking personal chef or something. Mind you, these kids were the dumbest bunch I've ever seen. One of them literally was clueless about the most basic facts, but still got into business management. Despised the lot of them. Glad I'm in Europe, far away from most of them. Group of rich school kids in Montana out driving around, drinking. Found 2 combines, large farm tractor thingies, worth about $250,000 each, out in a wheat field. Decided to have a demolition derby. Got caught. In the judge's chambers with the farmer who just wanted the damages reimbursed. The high-end family lawyers asked what the heck they were thinking when they did it. The response, "Well, you can't put a price on a good time." Turns out that was the wrong answer. That farmer should have wanted compensation for all his trouble. My God. Especially if the combines were in the field, like, dude is literally in the middle of harvesting. Can't tell you how many Thanksgiving vacations I helped my grandparents with stuff because everyone was still combining and drying corn until the middle of the night. He was 25 years old when I knew him. His father owned oil fields. He had a credit card that he used for anything and everything, that they paid the balance on every month. He never even kept track of what was charged on it, just bought whatever caught his fancy. He openly and shamelessly admitted that he offered his college professor money to give him a passing grade. One day, he was cranky about something and said, "I wish my parents would just die so I could have their money. Why should I have to wait?" When your children talk like Disney villains or members of the Borgia family, it's time to just throw them out and start from scratch. Back in high school, we were doing one of those icebreakers where we passed a beach ball around, and whoever caught it had to answer the question their thumb landed on. Well, this kid who was proclaimed being rich numerous times before talking about his parents owning a known pizza place and how he drives an expensive sports car caught the ball, and his question was, "If you won $1 million, what would you do with it?" His response was somewhere along the lines of, "$1 million wouldn't make any difference in my life." Thanks a lot, Brad. You ruined the game. Wow, what a frickin' power move, though. A very distant relative of ours, i.e. some weird branch of the family tree, offered her son a bribe of an entire apartment building if he finished his undergraduate accounting degree. I just went, "What?" So you get an immediate investment after graduating and you can rent out the place for mega dollars. My significant other has a rich aunt and uncle with an only child. When he graduated college, his gift was a complex that brings in enough money that this kid could retire on it. If you ask him, he's self-made though. I don't know about rich, but just spoiled. My cousin insisted on a $15,000 wedding ring and $30,000 wedding. She and the groom made about $20,000 to $25,000 a year combined. Her dad paid for everything. They divorced within 6 months. She wanted a wedding, not a marriage. I have a kid in my MBA cohort that outsources his homework and projects to India. He whined and moaned when one of our professors gave him a C when he only showed up to 2 classes after he, Dad, donated $10,000 to the school. Overall, nice guy, but doesn't really have a clue. Outsources his homework and projects to India? He's just practicing for when he goes into the corporate world. I'm trying to figure out how he passes in-class tests. Maybe the $10K donation went to the overworked and underpaid PhD student grading the exams. A kid who would dramatically throw down his smartphone on the ground in mock frustration. Broken phones were replaced with few to no questions. For the record, his name ended with the third. I went to middle/elementary school, but with some very wealthy people. Typically, I was oblivious enough to not really realize it, but 2 instances come to mind. In 5th grade, we did an exchange trip type of thing with some kids in Canada. On the flight over there, one of my classmates said, "Wow, this is crazy. I've only ever flown first class before." Later, in 8th grade, I was at that same kid's house, an absolute mansion on top of a hill, with the long landscaped entrance drive, marble-floored entrance hall with stairs winding up either side, etc., and he and a girl, who had been dropped off in her dad's newer Ferrari, started having a discussion comparing the merits of their relative in-home movie theaters. Like not just a living room with a cool AV setup, but full-on movie theaters with rows of seats that could seat about 50 people. My family wasn't poor, but that was when I realized we weren't rich either. I deliver pizza in a very rich area. I'm talking seeing Rolls-Royces and supercars on a daily basis kind of rich. My manager told me a story of someone that used to work there. This guy would deliver pizzas in a brand new BMW M3 and just put absolutely no effort into his job. Delivering pizza isn't hard. Apparently, this guy only had a job because his parents wouldn't pay his allowance if he didn't work. How much was his allowance? $5,000 a month. This guy was making $60,000 a year to deliver pizza part-time. That's actually super common with wealthy families. An acquaintance of mine has the same deal with his parents. Work 40 hours a week and get paid $100,000 a year in allowance, plus the $15,000 a month mortgage paid for. I should point out, this is a New York City financial district apartment. $15,000 a month is for a good-sized 2-bedroom condo. Normally when I spit my drink all over the screen when writing these scripts, it's because I'm laughing. This time, it was out of sheer incredulity. Brought my college roommate to my mum's house for Thanksgiving because he lived in a different state and I only lived 15 minutes from campus. I gave him a quick tour of the house and he was astonished by how clean it all was. My mum's a neat freak and keeps a very clean house. Then he said to my mum, "Wow, you guys must have a really good maid service." I've never seen my mum laugh that hard before. 2 girls, both nice and fairly level-headed, but also just raised too darn rich. One would take a taxi everywhere in town. It was a very safe, small college town with free campus buses, and she had taxi across campus. She lived 2 blocks away from me and would take a taxi from her dorm to my house. Google Maps says it's a full 4-minute walk. She swore she just had a terrible sense of direction and couldn't figure out where we lived. But you'd think after the first embarrassingly short taxi ride, she'd throw our address into Google Maps and just walk. The other would regularly complain about people not knowing how to manage their money. It took a while to figure out, but eventually it clicked that she meant very poor people didn't know how to invest their money in stocks and bonds. Then one day, we were having a conversation where she revealed she didn't think a house in Detroit in 2010 could possibly cost under $1 million. I told her I grew up in a nice $180,000 house, and she thought I was dumb or lying. Shattered her world when I showed her my home on Zillow. When she graduated college, she complained about how much stuff costs all the time. It was nice seeing her learn the value of $1 finally. Her parents stopped paying her way after she got a job. She was probably making $70,000 to $80,000 in her first job, but she was living in Pasadena too. She talked all the time about how poor she was and about how she was living in an apartment above a garage. But at the same time, I lived in an apartment with 5 other people and felt pretty wealthy, making $11 an hour, so I wasn't exactly heartbroken for her. Mother fricker, I'd chop off a limb to be making $80K a year. Kid in my high school crashed 6 cars within a year. And they weren't like 1990s Toyotas and Hondas most high schoolers buy, themselves. These were brand new Subaru STIs, a BRZ, a BMW, brand new Jeep, stuff like that. The last car his dad bought him was a semi-new Ford Focus, a decent car, better than my 1997 white Camry. Every day he complained and threw a fit his dad wouldn't buy him another $30,000 car. Sounds like his dad needs to buy him a driving tutor. Buying people is usually frowned upon. I work with a guy like the people in these stories. He recently proposed to a girl he dated for a few weeks with a $5,000 ring. He's 19 and we make less than $30,000 a year. They're married a month later. The girl always looks miserable and the guy is always skirting responsibilities at work. I'd say I only give it a few more weeks, but she might try to milk him for his daddy's money for a little longer. One of the kids in my grade brought bags of cocaine to senior prom. Not only did his parents let him go, but the police did too. Now I believe he's in an engineering program at Yale. Good luck with that, money won't save you from thermals and fluids. A kid that used to work for me came into work super teed off one day. I asked him what was wrong, to which he replied, "My freaking maid didn't make my bed again, but my dad still won't fire her." This was all my college roommates. They couldn't do laundry, pick up after themselves, clean dishes, or make themselves a frickin' sandwich. The ones whose parents lived close by, their mommies would come by and clean up and do their laundry. Came back from a music festival in Southeast Asia, got VIP tickets. I swear this isn't about me. One of the other festival goers is a 20-something-year-old Asian girl who looks like she is straight out of the movie Crazy Rich Asians. This chick had a photographer following her around, snapping pics of her posing in front of the stage with various acts, getting in the way of other people trying to dance. She asked security if she could get them to clear a section for her to get an unobstructed view of the stage for better photos. She bought a couple of bottles, 6, for her table, and again had the photographer take an incredible number of photos of her posing with her bottles of Martell and Jameson. She was incredibly rude to the waitstaff, snapping her fingers and in general talking to them like they were lower-class citizens. She asked my mate and I, both Westerners, to hang with her and her mates at her table, and again have the photographers take photos of her posing with us at the table. The other 2 guys from our group, both Asian, approached us when they saw that we were at the table and it looked like we had made some friends. When they approached us, the girl and her friends got quiet, spoke amongst themselves in Indonesian, and basically shooed them away. We left them after they did that and walked over to our friends. One of the guys is Indo and he told us that she basically told them to get lost and know your place. Friend in college literally went to the local GameStop at midnight every Tuesday. He'd buy every new release for every console. We went over to his house one time that year and he had about 60-ish games that were unopened. One time, we were walking around campus and he stopped by the ATM. He got his receipt and called his dad. Turns out his dad was worried his funds were running low, so he sent him $25K just to make sure he wasn't going to starve. I like to imagine that this guy went bankrupt trying to buy every new Steam release. Considering that some of the simulator games I've seen have more than tens of thousands of euros worth of DLC, looking at you train and flight simulators, that would be kind of amazing. I used to work for a family that had a cleaning lady come every other day. None of the kids made their own bed, had to make their own food, or wash their own dishes. Heck, never even loaded a dish into the dishwasher. They just left them on the table for someone else to pick up. Have never done their own laundry. When the son had football practice, I watched a teenaged boy have a gosh darn meltdown sobbing and cursing about their maid not throwing his uniform into the wash, and he didn't know how to do it himself. The 2 oldest are about to have a very interesting freshman year in college. Bonus story, when I was in college, I roomed with a girl who lived like this. Her mum did everything for her to the point where she couldn't function like a normal adult. Like her mum would drive 11 hours to clean this woman's room for her, clean up her used condom wrappers, etc. Her mum would get really snarky with me, like self-reliance was a loser quality, also because it made her daughter look bad. While it's really easy to learn to wash your own clothes, etc., she couldn't do it and just said, "Oh, well, I won't have to. When I graduate, I'm going to get a high-paying job and have everything done for me. I wasn't raised to be domestic like you. Fun fact, I wasn't raised that way. I did my own cooking and laundry because my mum couldn't be bothered to do anything but watch soap operas and Lifetime movies. Fast forward to the present day, guess who couldn't hack taking care of herself after college and had to move back in with her mum? I played football in a local kids league. One kid from another team was basically untouchable as his dad was a major sponsor of the league and would donate money for uniforms, drinks, etc. His son was a pretty good receiver but didn't like getting hit, and his parents made a big deal of leaving their son alone so he can develop his skills. He was insufferable. Anytime he scored a TD, he would do over-the-top celebrations and mock all the other players, his teammates included. Then came high school. Most of the kids in the league ended up in one of two schools. He went to mine. During tryouts, he did well. The coaches were mostly focused on skills and minimal contact during the first round of cuts. The final round was when things got interesting. Full contact was permitted, and he got rocked over and over again. No one was actually trying to tackle any harder than normal, it's just this dude didn't know what to do when he got tackled. So he screamed and cried a lot. He didn't make the team, until his dad came down to the school and offered to donate money for uniforms and some other goodies for our sports teams. So he made the team, and again we were told to take it easy on him a bit. So he did, but the other teams didn't, and he went up against some of the players he mocked previously, and they remembered. Our quarterback kept passing to him, and he was getting repeatedly smashed, over and over again. It was the only time our team cheered for the other team. He quit playing football after that. I can't help but feel bad for Football McChad III. Having your own team root against you and not understanding why everything your dad bought the team didn't help. I wonder if he became more isolated after that. Had a friend in high school whose dad was uninvolved. He was raised middle class like myself and lived with his mum and stepdad. After high school, he worked towards becoming an electrician and was saving for his first apartment. His dad eventually came around when he was right out of high school and started giving him money here and there when he needed it. His dad owned a large company on the East Coast and was a multi-millionaire. Soon his dad convinced him to quit trade work and gave him a job at his business. Shortly after, he was promoted to a managerial position he wasn't qualified for and paid way too much. He'd get drunk while on conference calls and nobody questioned him since he was the boss's son. His dad bought him his first home, almost $500,000, and multiple cars. He took up horse racing and, quickly, we had nothing in common. Gone were the days of dumb teenage stuff, going fishing, hiking, and video games together. He quickly found a girlfriend whose dad was a multi-millionaire. She was 30 and still putting everything on daddy's credit card. I couldn't keep up with their lifestyle and very quickly we faded as friends. After his girlfriend and him broke up, she told me that he was actually severely depressed and almost drove his car off a bridge multiple times. Deep down, he was having issues with wanting to live up to his dad's lifestyle and standards, but losing his old friends and life. It's too bad. I haven't seen him in probably 4 years now. We tried to reconnect a few times, but it just doesn't work anymore. That's really sad. It's like his dad wanted to make up for the neglect with money. A friend of my brother is also very well off. His parents offered him a $175,000 a year job in their family business to basically do nothing. He already lived rent-free in a waterfront apartment, car, credit card, etc. He spent his days doing drugs and partying. He's clean and sober now, but yes, it took years and years of rehab. And even now they offer him too much. He got married and they wanted to make it crazy ostentatious. It was already pretty glam, and he knows to reject it.
What stories do you rarely tell because nobody will believe you? I'm a living witness to something known as the McMasterville explosion. CIL, the paint company, made explosives. Their explosives factory, which was a giant factory on the same grounds as the paint-making factory. One night, the whole thing blew up. I was looking right at it when it went. Not just the explosives, but thousands of gallons of flammable liquids from other parts of the factory all went up at once. It was estimated to have the power of a 1 kiloton explosion. I lived on the side of a mountain called Mount St. Hilaire, a little over a mile away looking down at the factory site. When you see an explosion like that from a distance, the land ripples like water, like when you drop a stone in water. I was riding a bike. The ground shook me first, then the air blast knocked me on my butt. The factory was deliberately sunk into the ground and surrounded by a high trench wall in case it ever blew up so the nearby town of Beloil wouldn't get leveled. So the explosive force got punched into the ground and the factory was blown straight up into the air. Tons of wreckage rained down for miles. No one I know of was hit by anything, but many small fires were started all over the place. My next-door neighbor found a train wheel in his backyard, and it was red hot when he found it. Apparently, this occurred in 1972, and at least 6 people died.
That my father was arrested for stealing $100,000 worth of Hershey's Kisses, and during his time in jail I found out that he was not my biological father. My biological father owned a chain of restaurants that I frequented as a kid and teenager. I found all this out a few weeks after my 18th birthday.
What would you even want with $100,000 worth of Hershey's Kisses?
I was 6 years old and my parents took my family down to Disney World. Yay! On the flight down, the pilot made an announcement that if you looked out the window, you could see the space shuttle launching. It was kind of far away, but I could definitely see it in a plume of smoke. Very cool. We land in Orlando, and everyone is dead silent, glued to the TVs. It was the Challenger, and it exploded on launch. I saw the Challenger explode.
The 28th of January, 1986. I faked playing a xylophone for 2 years so I could go to China once. I played trombone for 8 years through middle and high school, and I knew a few people at my college before I went there. They convinced me to join marching band, but were always complaining that the band director wrote impossible drills, 10 counts to move, 30 yards in some instances, run through the bass drums, that sort of crap. I, being the genius that I was, figured, well, I played keyboard in a ska band for a couple years. How hard could xylophone be? Xylophones don't march after all. Answer: xylophone is pretty goddamn hard, and I'd never played one in my life before the first day of band camp, which is when the auditions were. The guy doing the auditions was the percussion instructor for the College of Music, and after my audition, he told me to put the mallets down, step back, and never play xylophone again, which, to be fair, I did butcher the crap out of hot cross buns due to some sort of administrative mess-up. They never got around to actually kicking me out that year, and I hung around and pretended to play the xylophone. Now, every 2 years, my college's marching band takes a big trip somewhere overseas to perform and yada yada yada, and I had entered on an off year. The second year, I show up and do the same thing, except the percussion instructor has been fired. I never really dealt with him beyond defending him with my ability to butcher xylophone music, but to my understanding, he was a general butthole and the music department had been wanting to chuck him out for some time, so they made a big stink about him doing some paperwork incorrectly or something. So it was left to our section leaders to audition the section, and being good friends with the section leader, he just said, "Jenkins, hit something every now and again, but not very hard and make it look like you're playing," so that's what I did. I found the softest mallet in the place, barely tapped the keys, wham, bam, going to China. Everything would have worked out peachy. Except our band director also didn't pay any attention to the orchestra pit. So when he was doling out parts for the music we were going to play in China, he assigned me to concert bells. Like that tiny little 50-pound xylophone that has a sound that would cut through an aerial bombardment. Not only that, I had a solo at the beginning of The Moon Represents My Heart, which, as it was explained to me, is basically Somewhere Over the Rainbow for Chinese people. Everybody knows the song. It's a cultural treasure and not something you want to mess up at a national landmark, because folks will notice. So I busted my butt actually learning how to play that bit over the span of a couple months and managed to avoid offending the people of Shanghai and Beijing. Not all the people, though. A group of Chinese youths caught me urinating into a bush in Shanghai's club district, and I had to duck into a place called Highway 3 with my dinger still hanging out to get away from them. Got to play a set of concert bells on the Great Wall and see a whole bunch of stuff in China, though. It's ridiculous to me that seemingly no one who was ever in charge of this marching band really had any clue what the hell they were doing, or what was going on really with this band. When I was 19, some friends and I were visiting New York City. After picking them up from the airport, we decided it would be fun to drive down Broadway at night and see it all lit up. It was fun. We got some good pictures from the car, and around 8:30 we decided to drive home. Going northbound on the West Henry Hudson, we were talking and listening to some Journey when someone hopped the highway divider and ran out in front of my car, stopped, and looked right at us. There was no time to stop, no time to swerve, and at 50 miles per hour, he came crashing straight through the front windshield, hitting my best friend directly in the face. Immediately, I pulled over and called the police, then went to look to see if there were any slim chances the man might still be alive. I saw his legs swerved roughly 4 to 6 inches above the knee and on the road near where my car had stopped. My friend in the back seat was crying her eyes out, and my buddy was amped up on adrenaline and shock in the front seat waiting for the police to arrive and remove him from the car. Walking further back, I saw a bunch of people who had stopped to help crowded around the man. I saw his head caved in and a dark pool underneath him, before a kind old gentleman turned me away, saying, "You don't need to see this." In almost no time at all, the fire department was there helping my friend who had a broken nose and shards of glass embedded in his eye and face out of the car. When the ambulance arrived, they tried to pull him in with the man I had hit, which made him freak out and refuse and wait for another ambulance. The cops on the scene took down my story and ran a breathalyzer on me, but I hadn't been drinking. At this time in my life, I didn't drink. Then put my friend from the back seat and I in the back of a car to try and calm us down while they waited for the investigators to arrive. I had called my mom, who lived outside the city, to tell her I had been in an accident and that she should come for support. After about an hour, the investigators arrived, took time marking off the scene, and interviewed us again about what had happened. The police were very nice and all of us were in shock. After interviewing me, I asked the investigator where I could go to the bathroom. He nodded to the trees on the side of the highway and said to have at it. So I stood on the dimly lit bloody highway near the trees and under the watchful eye of the 50-block traffic jam I had created, and let forth a stream I had been holding for hours. Afterwards, they took us back to the local precinct to finish paperwork and meet up with my mom and sister who were waiting there, after having left my stepbrother with my friend who had been taken to the hospital. They had gotten lost and caught in the same traffic I caused, which is why they didn't meet us at the scene. With the paperwork done, my mom asked what had happened to the man. The officer looked at my little sisters and then asked my mom and I to step outside. It was DOA. He had been released from prison that morning. I was shocked when he extended his hand to me and thanked me for helping to clean up the city. After going to the hospital to get my friend and stepbrother, we went home for the evening. The next day, when we picked up my car from the auto shop, I saw the meager sunlight, the after image of what had transpired, blood and brain matter all over the front of my car, an imploded front windshield, and entering the car to take it to a place to get the glass repaired, a large chunk of bloody skull in the passenger seat next to me, hidden under some napkins. My friend who had been in the passenger seat wandered over and I told him not to look inside, but he wouldn't listen and did anyway. I think that is when the reality of what happened sunk in for him, because his eye grew large and he turned around silently to go sit in my mom's car. The entire experience was completely surreal, especially during the drive to get the windshield repaired when alone I drove the car to the shop, the wind whistling through the broken glass. I want to believe that when the cops said, "Thanks for cleaning up the city," the guy who died was maybe just a real piece of work and did some awful stuff, but maybe this dude is just completely indifferent about this stuff, which is pretty horrible. My other thought is that this individual also enjoys creative writing. TLDR, almost had a knife to my brain because of some crazy quack doctor leaping to very rash conclusions. Don't you hate it when doctors jump to conclusions? I know I've posted this somewhere before, but anyway, I was 10, lived out in rural America where my closest neighbor was a football field's length away. Between us was an overgrown field that backed up to my neighbor's horse pasture. I used to run through the fields full blast with weeds and grass stalks and wildflowers that were taller than me. I didn't give a crap. So one morning I wake up and something isn't right. I have this horrible pain in my neck. My neck! Oh God, what happened to my neck? My neck was swollen to the point of it jutting past my chin. It was like a 350-pound person's neck on a little 90-pound girl. I screamed. Mom screamed when she saw it. We took off for the pediatrician right away. Of course, as fate would have it, my usual pediatrician wasn't in that day, so a stand-in was there. I remember very mild tests going on, nothing too crazy, before the doctor explains to my mother that it's a brain tumor and I'll have to have brain surgery right away. I am freaking out, and my mom isn't too calm either. She, however, rationalizes, and before she makes her plans to have them cut into my skull, takes me to her own doctor for a second opinion. The RN at that office peers at me for a minute, performs a few other mild tests, and then goes, "Aha," and lifts up my ponytail. She points at this small bump on the back of my neck and proudly exclaims, "Spider bite." 2 days rest and some penicillin and I was 100% again. That was a pretty crazy conclusion to come to after it's like, well, when did the lump show up? Just this day. Then again, what kind of crazy spider bite was it? Around the age of 12, I was diagnosed with severe OCD. I struggled with it so much that I had psychiatrists say they could do no more for me. A therapist that made house calls, and I've even participated in studies, evaluated on the other side of a one-way mirror kind of stuff. Perhaps in desperation, my parents eventually sent me to a psychiatric hospital halfway across the country which specialized in the treatment of OCD. I was there for 3 months until my insurance ran out. Now I'm 22 years old and I've overcome it so much that nobody besides family even realizes anything is/was ever wrong with me. With all these people running around saying I'm so OCD, I eat my M&Ms one color at a time, and them not knowing me back then, I don't even bother divulging a part of my life they would be unable to comprehend the severity of. You know, I totally get that. As someone with ADHD who used to get support of it when I was a kid, and I used to see these people and they'd say to me things like, "So, is your ADHD better now? Is it gone yet?" And I go, well, I don't think it works like that. I absolutely hated those memes, but my point is those issues, mental disorders, learning difficulties never really go away. You simply learn to adjust your life around it and behave accordingly in certain situations, and people often don't talk about that much. I'm late to the thread, so this will probably get buried, but hey, I feel like telling the story. It's a bit spooky. Hopefully someone will find it a good read. My mom and I moved into a completely normal/average house when I was about 15. Everything was fine. We loved it. One day I was home sick from school and I was messing around on the computer when I heard our garage door open. I freaked out and went down the hall to get my mobile phone and saw the hallway door that connects to the garage opening. I panicked and yelled, "Get out!" and 2 young boys slammed the door and ran off. I started crying and called my mom. I don't know why I didn't call the police first, who told me to go next door to my neighbors and she was going to come home from work. When she got home, she was speaking to my neighbor for a bit. She, the neighbor, ended up telling us that she thought it was probably the young boy that lived in the house before us. Apparently, he sometimes goes around to everyone's houses and breaks in and eats their food and watches TV and stuff. And for whatever reason, they were all okay with that. Apparently, he came from some sort of broken home and they all felt sorry for him, so they didn't call the police. Mom and I were completely unsettled by that and put new locks on all the doors that week. We didn't care if the other neighbors were okay with that. We weren't. A few months pass and nothing ever happens again. We figure he knows we're not cool with his weirdness and doesn't try to break in again. A week or so later, I'm in bed asleep and I wake up in the middle of night for no reason at all. I'm not hot or cold. I don't need to pee. I didn't have a nightmare. I just woke up. I had this incredibly uneasy and weird feeling wash over me. I felt like something or someone was watching me and I got completely freaked out. I went into my mom's room and slept in her bed that night. It kept happening a few nights and I thought I was just having nightmares or was getting scared of the dark for some reason. I ended up sleeping in my mom's bed for about a week because I got so legit scared of the dark now. I finally worked up the courage to sleep in my own bed one night, but I could barely sleep. I felt totally uneasy, nervous, scared. I got to sleep for a bit, but then I woke up again. I looked outside my window and I could swear I saw a face/figure of someone standing there. Obviously, I noped the hell out and ran back to my mom. One of the nights I was back in her bed. We were all asleep and feeling fine when I woke up to my dog on the end of the bed growling. Now, our dog is an old golden retriever and has never growled or barked at anything. She is a huge wuss and completely placid. She has no problem with strangers. Even if someone knocks on the door and comes in, she couldn't care less. So I wake up all dazed, confused, and half asleep. I hear the dog growling and I'm asking her, "What's wrong?" I look up from the bed and I'm not lying to you, there is a man standing in the doorway with a knife. I screamed like a banshee and the dog started barking at this point. Mom woke up and saw the man too. He went running down the hallway and out the back door. I'm crying my eyes out. The dog is barking her face off and Mom is frantically trying to call the police. An hour later they finally get here and of course the dude is gone. Morning comes and we go outside to see that the back gate has had its lock cut with bolt cutters and the door leading into the house had been smashed in. The cops come in and dust for prints and leave crap everywhere, but at the end of the day they can't and don't do anything. We moved out that same day and went to live with my grandmother and grandfather until we found a new house. Pretty much no one in the family believed us or thought we were just making it up for attention. My family are buttholes. A few weeks later, we get a call from the police, and they managed to match the prints to some teenager who just got arrested for breaking into another house. It's the same guy that was breaking into all the houses in the neighborhood and used to live in the house we were in. So Mom's talking to the cops and some of the neighbors when suddenly someone tells us completely casually, "Oh yeah, that's the Millet kid." Wait, did they just say Millet? Yeah, pretty much any Australian will know this last name. Ivan Millet, the serial killer. His nephew was breaking into people's homes and our home while we were sleeping with a knife, and people were okay with that. So anyway, we move into a new house and forget all about it. Until a year ago. Millet's nephew gets 43 years jail sentence. He and his friend murdered another teenager in the same goddamn place his uncle dumped all those bodies. WTF. So, the guy that broke into our house watched me while I was asleep and stood in our bedroom doorway with a knife while we were sleeping actually murdered another teenager a few years later. Mom and I nearly fell over when we heard about it. No one really believes us, which really annoys me, but it really happened. Sometimes when I think back on what could have happened if I slept in my own bed that night, or if the dog didn't bark, or if we were never woken up, it really freaks me out. It's also left me with a huge fear of the dark. I get really uneasy if I have to go outside at night by myself or if I wake up in the middle of the night. Well, goddamn, I'm English and even I know who Ivan Miller is. But that is a legitimately terrifying story. I went to college at Belmont University in Nashville from 1999 until 2002. While I was there, I worked for record labels, as did a lot of friends who were all in the music business program. Well, one buddy worked for a label called Red Hill Records as an intern/gopher/indentured servant. So on occasion, we could go to events and meet industry people and artists, as this was a small label. They had an artist that we became friends with named Katie Hudson, who was a singer-songwriter at about 17 years old. We hung out all the time since we were just 18 ourselves and had nothing to do but study and bum around coffee shops. As our friendship developed, my roommate developed a huge crush on her. She never seemed to reciprocate the feeling, so I asked her what was wrong with him. You know, trying to be a good friend. And she revealed that she liked me instead of him. So, since I wanted to be a good friend, I had to turn her down because of his feelings for her. That girl went on to be Katy Perry. I kid you not. I suppose that's pretty impressive. I'm not really a Katy Perry person, but good for this guy. And while I'm not going to read them, some of the follow-up comments are pretty cringe. My friend's father owned a Mercedes CLS when I was a senior in high school. One day when his father is gone, we take it out. We have some ganja in both of our grinders in the cup holders, which was freaking stupid. We always put that stuff in the trunk. As we approach a downsloped hill near our school in the most cliche manner possible, he decides he wants to show me how fast his dad's car can go. The road was narrow and the slope was pretty steep downwards, but went right back up after it reached the bottom. He books it, and by the time we reach the bottom of the hill, we're probably going 90 miles per hour. Right at the bottom, we pass a cop, like frickin' fly right by him. He turns his lights on and tries to turn around, but one or two cars gets between us and him. The road was so narrow that he had to do like a 3-point turn to get all the way around. We start to frickin' panic. I have no idea what came over me at this point. Only about 3 seconds after we see the cop, but seeing that it took him so long to turn around made me look at my friend and say, "Keep going." We go to the top of the hill, still going fast AF, take a right, go about 100 yards and take a left into a neighborhood. We go down a random driveway in a cul-de-sac park and turn the car off. We chuck all of the ganja materials out of the car and slump down in our chairs, peeking back. We see the cop go around the cul-de-sac and leave the neighborhood. I swear to God, it was like the goddamn Italian Job. Never been so scared in my life. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. My mom thought Paul McCartney kidnapped me. My mom was walking with me on the beach in the Hamptons when I was an infant. McCartney came up to my mom and asked if he could hold me. My mom was in desperate need of the bathroom and didn't want to go inside with me, so she asked if McCartney wouldn't mind watching me for a few minutes. Apparently, I started sobbing, so he paced up and down the beach and my mom couldn't find me when she came out of the bathroom. She called my dad and they spent 2 hours looking for me before they found McCartney sitting on a bench chair with me in his arms. I don't care if the baby's crying. You stand exactly where I left you with my baby. If someone trusts you with their baby, you don't move an inch. This may get buried and not be as interesting as some of the others, but I have one that nobody ever believes. When I was in 4th grade, I was completely obsessed with Chuck Berry. I mean, religiously obsessed. I still am to a certain extent, but that was back in the day when I was first discovering rock and roll. Well, as fortune would have it, Chuck Berry came to my city to perform at the local venue. He must have been in his 70s at this point. I was beyond excited, so of course, my mother, being the caring and loving parent that she is, bought tickets and we went. The whole entire show, I was in the very front, and then I had an idea. I didn't know if it could possibly work or not, but there was a pause, and I went for it. While Chuck was tuning his guitar, I started yelling, "Mr. Berry, Mr. Berry!" To my absolute bewilderment, he leaned in from the stage and with a huge grin on his face asked me, "What's up, little buddy?" To which I replied, "Can I please sing Johnny Be Good with you?" Holy crap, he says yes. I'm a 4th grader on stage at a huge venue with the father of rock and roll about to sing one of his most famous songs with him. He starts the opening riff. I'm shaking, but not from stage fright. No, it was from sheer shock of being in this situation. I start singing. The crowd erupts. I bellow out the song. At the end, Chuck asks me, "What's your name, young man?" I tell him my name. The crowd starts cheering my name for a solid minute. It was the most incredible feeling and hands down the best gift I've ever received. Now, personally, I'm more of a fan of Maybelline, why can't you be true? Oh, Maybelline, why can't you be true? You just started doing the things you used to do.
What traits in girls do you find attractive or impressive aside from physical appearance, guys? My wife's laughs are literally everything. Sometimes she watches a show on her laptop in our room and I hear her cracking up from down the hall. I absolutely love it. One of the main reasons I started dating my current girlfriend was because she accidentally spilled popcorn in my car after our first date. She profusely apologized and asked if she could clean it up. My car was a POS, so I didn't care. When I got home, she texted me apologizing again. I don't know why, but her caring about spilling popcorn in my crappy car made me realize, hey, maybe she could care about me too. Aw, she spilled popcorn into your heart. Ah man, I had a similar situation except I was the spiller. 3rd date in a city on a sunny afternoon. Coffee all over her light blue jeans and she just laughed it off. I knew then she had an amazing outlook on life. We got engaged last week. Gotta love people that don't let spilled milk ruin their days. Shows a lot about their character. Accountability. If she can openly admit when she's wrong or that she messed up, that's attractive, as it shows maturity and the ability to judge yourself impartially, and it means you are less likely to repeat the mistake. This also means that you feel for her if not only love, it's respect, which is just as important. Wow, this is fantastic. I've dated girls in the past who would never just say, "I was wrong, I shouldn't have done that, I'm sorry." I get that it's hard sometimes, but it's relieving to admit wrongdoing and ask for forgiveness. But when you obsessively chase not having done wrong in the first place, it's actually a tax on both parties. I 100% agree with this. I'll take it a step further by saying when you text or call a woman and she doesn't answer, but later says, "Hey, I'm sorry I couldn't respond, I got caught up with insert reason here," instead of just saying, "I was busy," it shows that they respect you enough to let you know that there was a real reason they couldn't respond. This is nice because they don't owe you an explanation of why they didn't respond, but them doing so shows an amount of caring on their part. Things like confidence, a good sense of humor, intelligence, all of that is super important. But for me, the sexiest thing a woman can do is be calm. Not calm as in quiet, as in calm when crap goes sideways or something unexpected happens. Having someone who is reliable and stable as a partner is so crucial in life. I didn't realize how attractive that sounds until I read it. To not have to burn calories on dealing with my partner and the situation, that's so hot right now. It's probably one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from my father. He explained that when every possible thing goes wrong, the last thing you want is a partner that makes it even harder by panicking, getting angry, or making things worse. Plus, the tenacity, toughness, and resilience, it's freaking sexy. Don't get me wrong, I love taking care of a lady as much as the next guy, but when a girl just buckles down and solves a problem in a cool, collected manner, man, that's an instant spiritual and physical boner. Spiritual boners are some of the best boners. I'm loving this thread. My wife is baseline stressed and an anxious person. She's always doing a lot of stuff for her career and taking on way too much. So I feel like the calm caretaker a lot of the time. However, in times of crisis, she locks in and is such a calm and collected source of comfort. I had one horrible disc herniation a few years back that resulted in such bad pain I was writhing and screaming in agony. She called an ambulance, explained what was happening, and made sure I was sorted. She called my parents, handled them, and made sure everything I needed, I had. She was an absolute rock star. I can't describe how grateful I was and how taken care of I felt. From there, we sort of realized that the day-to-day maintenance I'm better at, but in times of crisis, she's second to none. I'll never forget that though. I never felt so loved and cared for in my life. Anxiety can be a superpower. It's the fear of the unknown that affects the anxious. So you're constantly worried about what's going to happen and thinking through different scenarios in your head, etc. Then when an emergency happens, you just lock into problem solver mode because you run through these drills in your head 1,000 times before. It's awesome that you guys found each other to balance things out. As someone who has been diagnosed with panic disorder and severe anxiety, I can confirm that when crap hits the fan, I'm on my toes and ready to handle the situation. Not exclusive to girls, but having a hobby or interest that they are very knowledgeable and passionate with, that's great. Even if it's something super benign like painting their nails or baseball, I just love people who can ramble on about their interest, especially if I'm not into it. It's like peeking into another world. Knew a girl that was into knitting, but not just like I knew how to cross stitch. Full on had a setup where she would turn wool into yarn and even had a favorite small sheep farm that she would order from exclusively. She was interesting as hell to me. Exactly. So many times I'll ask a woman, hell, this applies to men just as much, what does she do for fun? And it's almost always scrolling through social media or Netflix. I'll rephrase the question, asking about any sort of active or creative hobbies they do when they aren't relaxing. And it's like they don't understand the difference. You're not wrong that there are a lot of people that spend their free time doing those things, but also in my experience, many people's minds seem to go blank on the specific question. I'm not totally sure why though. This is weird, but I've had success with asking this question. Pretend you have an unexpected week-long staycation starting tomorrow. What are you going to be doing this week? Then they'll tell you about projects, art, home improvement, pets, and things that they've been working on or wanting to get a chance to do. Or maybe they just don't and they're actually not interested in anything other than TV and social media. Either way, you've learned something about them. Critical thinking skills are hot. I would adjust this to curiosity. Curious people who investigate, inquire, and show genuine interest often use critical thinking as a byproduct. I say this impresses me in anyone. When managing people, if I have a curious employee who wants to know why something works the way it does, or wants to find a tool or technology to improve, they are always earmarked for career investment. In women, finding a curious person means that you will be able to find someone who will likely not bore you over the long haul, because curiosity as a personality trait means that she's the type of person to engage in things that are important and keep away that every day is the same creep that tends to infiltrate a relationship. And for clarification for those who say, well, dumb people can be curious too, I think those are missing my meaning. I mean more intellectually curious, and less, what does this electrical socket taste like? I find a woman's voice to be one of the best factors in determining if I'm attracted to a woman. Do you mean like accent, pitch, tone, all of the above? All of the above and what she says. A woman can look stunning, but in opening her mouth she reveals who she truly is. To know if a woman is intelligent, funny, angry, depressed, or even sexy, I don't need to see, I need to hear. Above all else, as a man, I try to listen. The second best advice I ever got about dating was to get the other person to talk, to ask leading questions. The first, of course, is to make them laugh. And a woman's laugh will reveal so much about them. Authenticity and genuine character do not look anything like I've ever seen, but I can hear them. Here's the answer I was looking for. I was a phone hookup operator for over a decade. I initially went into it because random dudes would just go nuts over my voice all of the time. I'd call in for customer support on my phone and the tech guy would ask for my number. And things like that. I still sell my voice for a living, but not in the hookup industry anymore. My clients are all women now, but even though they aren't attracted to me intimately for the most part, I still get comments on my voice. Tons are surprised by my age too. I'm 46, but I still easily sound like I'm in my 20s. I can confirm a nice voice will win me over quickly. Same goes for nice eyes and a good smile. Intelligence. Good looks only go so far when you realize she doesn't even know basic life skills. If they can't have an interesting conversation, then why would you want to spend years with that person? I understand if you're looking for a short-term physical encounter. However, if you are looking for a long-term relationship, the ability to communicate is paramount. 100% agree. The girl I dated before my wife was hot, like smoking hot. Her hobbies were basically working out and eating like a rabbit. Hands down the most physically attractive girl I ever dated. But that was it, nothing more. She never had anything interesting to say, never had an opinion on anything, never laughed at jokes or funny movies. She was just a void of personality and took no pleasure in the joys of life. I eventually had to break it off. Now my wife, on the other hand, is the polar opposite. She's beautiful, but she's just a normal human. She's the funniest person I know. She knows what's going on in the world and is driven to make it a better place. And most importantly, she's been extremely supportive of me, and she's the one person I know I can talk about anything with. It's like having a best friend that I can play no-close games with. Years ago, I had been dating a girl who was getting a degree in neuroscience. Even though I wasn't a scientist of any sort, I loved talking to her and listening to her go on and on about the brain and the central nervous system. Not only was she smart, but she was passionate and interesting. We split up when I moved to Los Angeles without her. One night, I was at a bar with a friend, and I was talking to a girl who had moved to LA to be a singer. I asked her something like, "So, you're a singer, eh?" And then this girl responded by launching into a full-voiced version of "I Will Always Love You" in the middle of the bar. In that moment, I vividly remember thinking, I miss my neuroscientist. 2 weeks later, I took a plane to the East Coast, called her up and wooed her from her new boyfriend. She moved to SoCal and got her PhD in neuroscience. We got married and have 3 awesome children. She still blows my mind when she talks about her work. I find women that are the complete opposite of me hella attractive. Not sure why, but at least on 3 separate occasions, I have been attracted to nurses that I knew and were friends with. I want to make movies and write comic books, so we're totally opposite. But with one of these women, I remember it like it was yesterday. We were driving to a show to watch a band in another city, and on this hour-long drive, she turned sideways in the passenger seat, like her back was against the passenger door. Probably unsafe even though she was still wearing her seatbelt. And she just looked at me and listened to me while we were driving to this show. It was one of the best freaking interactions I've had with a woman because she just felt present in that moment. Went on a date last week and the woman never took her phone out of her purse. Super hot. If she doesn't take her phone out of her purse, how is she supposed to show you 300 pictures of her cat? How they treat themselves, self-care, how they treat others, friendship, how they work with others, collaboration, what they enjoy learning, curiosity, and what they enjoy doing, creativity. Intelligence, confidence, self-awareness, empathy, creativity, education. Also being pet-friendly is a big plus. So basically anything you'd like from a decent human being. Being emotionally intelligent and mature, which includes having kindness and empathy, etc., can go a long way as it shows me that you're capable of being a decent human being towards myself and others, and that you won't be someone that I have to be careful around. Bonus points if I get the vibe that you're a chill person. Enthusiasm, boundaries, responsible for herself, allows her to be challenged in her thinking, enough backbone to keep me honest when I'm wrong. Being self-sufficient. I don't want to date a dependent. When my wife and I were dating, one of the things that made her stand out was that she was totally self-sufficient. She didn't need help, nor did she expect it. We dated for almost 2 years before making the decision to move in together, and that was mostly on confluence of circumstances. She wanted to live on her own because it was freedom for her. Man, I feel that. My wife is completely self-sufficient. She's better educated and makes more than me. She does not need to be with me, but she is. And it feels great that someone who doesn't need me chooses to stay with me. Being with an independent woman is super hot because you know for the fact that she doesn't need you at all. So knowing that she is with you because she wants to be is super hot. Bit of a simple one here, but I love when a girl can sing. My wife claims that she can't carry a tune in a bucket, but when she sings, it's beautiful sounds to my ears. And I feel I have a responsibly good judgment on vocal quality. When we have a couple of drinks, I get my guitar out and can occasionally convince her to sing a few songs with me. It's one of my favorite things to do. The same traits I look for in my best friend. General vibes need to be on point, thoughtful, kind, sassy. I'm perfectly happy single, so my partner needs to add to my life and make sure our time together is more valuable than my time alone.
If she's got a dark sense of humor. I like women like I like my chocolate Easter bunnies. Dark, bitter, and with a gnarly hollowness inside that can never be filled.
Someone with equivalent levels of apathy and laziness, but about areas of life that complement my own apathy and laziness. That way one of us will always let the freaking dog out or put the kettle on. But I don't feel too guilty for saying Sofa Saturday. I'm not getting dressed. Been married 16 years. Perfect. I'm not a guy, so I don't count. But I like when girls are genuinely kind and have good banter. Like you can be cheeky and funny and a little sassy, but I still like a nice girl. I've always been attracted to those kind of girls in the room. I can agree with this. I like a woman that can get along with my male friends. Also my female friends, because if she can't, that's a red flag. But I don't want her to be one of the boys like many guys say they want. I want her to be her own unique self. I want her to be the reason I don't want to be around my boys all the time.
I saw a girl riding a fixed bike in the city and doing bunny hops with the bike at the intersection to stay upright. I had only just started riding my bike again, and I was just so impressed with the skills.
Optimism. I'm a bit of a pessimist at times. I fall into nihilistic thinking a lot. Good to have someone who could look to our future with a positive light. Adventurous. Being willing to put yourself at risk of humiliation, danger, or failure when encountering new activities is attractive. I will say I definitely like an adventurous woman, or at least someone who wants to plan out and try new things. I often get lost in my work, and it's nice to have someone to invite you out to do things. When I dated my ex, the one thing that constantly made me fall in love with her was just her ability to just get excited to talk about anything. I loved seeing her just get excited about either the littlest thing or whatever was on her mind that day. Enthusiastic or interested in me. That is so reassuring to have. Also, for her to have some hobby or activity, whether it be tennis or an instrument or Dungeons and Dragons or theater. Something she's passionate about would be nice.
If her principles and values are similar to mine, it's a way to minimize unnecessary discussions and keep harmony while enjoying each other's company.
When she's not afraid to get her hands dirty, kill a bug or two, or unclog a toilet. I'd like to add, and she likes to wash her hands after. It's exhausting to be in a relationship with someone who constantly requires reassurance, praise, and affirmation. Know your worth, and if others don't recognize it, move on and find a relationship with people who do. I understand what you mean, but keep in mind that praise, affirmation, and reassurance is absolutely something that everybody needs and wants. I'm sure there's some experience behind your comment, but it's about finding a balance between knowing your worth and being with someone who empowers that understanding. For some people, their own worth is easier to understand with a bit of outside help. There are a lot of traits that I find attractive, but the one I absolutely love is bravery. And by bravery, I don't mean just doing outlandish things and acting foolish. By bravery, I mean brave enough to confront what's wrong, brave enough to acknowledge her mistakes or shortcomings, brave enough to take on challenges and negative situations head on.
I will never date a girl without all of these. Number 1, friends. Number 2, well-defined interests or hobbies, preferably ones that involve more than just looking attractive. I'm talking even simple things like their own established favorite music, movies, etc. And number 3, something equating to a career or career goals. I don't care if it's school or working in customer service at an office or rising up the ranks at a retail store, but something with intent. And frankly, I think most of the things that other people are saying in this thread, things like confidence, intelligence, sense of humor, etc., are all easier to find in people who have these 3 things. They're basically just cornerstones of having an actual independent personality. Basically, I've dated far too many women whose entire personality, self-worth, and motivation are simply being a girlfriend. Sometimes I just feel like I like everyone. My standards are almost non-existent. If I spend more than a few hours every day for like 3 weeks with someone, I'm at risk at falling in love, because I don't do that crap for anybody. I had to address this same situation today actually. I had to tell a girl that I'm friends with that I needed some distance because goddamn, we were talking a lot and I started catching feelings. Man, I don't like that. That's some scary crap right there.
Girls who like sports, and not in the name the 1986 World Series champs. Just like to shoot hoops or play in the rec league or play pickleball with some friends and throw the football on the beach or something. That's hot.
The ability to be one of the guys. I like a cute, pretty, pampered princess as far as the looks. I'll admit I'm a sucker for an innocent girly girl look, but I'd rather have someone I can take out on insane adventures and go do stupid crap like fireworks or play video games and swear at each other while we make hookup jokes. Just that comfortable personality where I don't have to impress her and I can just be me.
I get the understanding with the be one of the guys things, but do you ever think these guys just want to date their guy friends? If a girl has a talent or a skill that took time and dedication and still interests them, it's incredibly attractive. Like if I'm not physically attracted to someone, then I find out that they play bass guitar or super into making pottery or something, they instantly become very attractive.
Any girl who can calculate the homogeneous linear second-order differential equation with the regular singular point would make me melt in a second-order solution. The last 2 girls I dated had one major thing in common. The first, we were having a discussion, a friendly argument about philosophy, and she was holding her own. Then I said something, don't even remember what, and she said, "That's not even close to what the book says. You know, I have it right here. I can take it out and prove you wrong." I had a boner so hard that I had to look away and think about my grandma. The second, a jokingly silly argument, which I tend to be good at. She won, I had no rebuttal. I love girls who are smarter than me, and they have the balls to prove it. That's just so hot. As someone else said, critical thinking is fantastic, along with being secure with herself, emotionally stable and independent. I'm so over the fragile, clingy girl that worships me as a means of seeking validation. No, I'm not being cocky in saying that. Anyone who has been there knows it's less about me and more about the other party seeking what they're missing, and being discarded for the next shiny object that's likely to come. The ability to hold her ground in a debate and push back and not fold in conversation when her heart knows that she's right. A girl who has balls is hot.
Hey, yo!
What disgusting secrets does your employer keep from its customers? The fajitas sizzle because we pour oil and water on a hot plate, not because we grilled anything. My whole life is a lie. Former employer was charging clients for a WAN backup solution that wasn't even running. I was still actively developing it when I quit. Client called up and asked to see the records of the backup. I said it wasn't running and that we didn't have any to my knowledge. Client flips out, calls boss flips out at me for not lying. Screw that noise. I used to work in a major movie theater and we would recycle hot dogs. Basically, if the links were on the spinning rack all day and didn't get purchased, they would be thrown in a bucket and refrozen. We poked a fork hole in one to see how long it would stay on rotation. 7 freaking days. Worked for a self-storage place in Rocklin, California. They made every customer sign a lease agreement that said that you wouldn't hold them responsible if your unit was broken into and things were stolen. I found out that we had 7 to 8 burglaries a year. The owners would get sued, but they would always get off because they produced the lease agreement in court and the judge would dismiss the case. One day, I came in from vacation to pick up my paycheck, and I found the owner and the manager loading up a truck with the contents from a unit that wasn't theirs. I went around the corner to an area where the fence allowed me to look in, and saw that they went to another storage space, cut off the lock, and proceeded to load up the truck with a telescope, big screen TV, and some power tools. I came back the next day and asked one of my coworkers. He told me that the owners of the storage space would sell the stuff they stole from renters, and that the manager and the owner did the same thing with another property that they owned in Granite Bay. I quit to go back to Sac State. I called the Rockland cops to tell them what the owners were doing, and they said that there was nothing they could do unless they were caught in the act. Tim Hortons Smile Cookies. Pay an extra $1 for a chocolate chunk cookie with a smile drawn on it. All proceeds go to local charity. Unfortunately, store owner would just go into the system, void all cookie sales, and replace them with regular chocolate chunk cookie sales. A small business owner for whom I worked several years ago kept deducting the employees' health insurance premiums but never sent the payments in to the carrier. After 2 to 3 months of this, our insurance was canceled right before one lady's teenage son was in a fairly serious car accident. She finds out at the emergency room, during what is of course an extremely stressful time, that she has no insurance whatsoever when she and her dependents have been fully covered. The next day she went into his office, very upset, to find out what happened. He gave his usual song and dance and made excuses for not having been able to send it in, and this normally mild-mannered lady picked up a stapler and threw it at him. He wasn't even injured. While doing that was, of course, unacceptable, I totally understood her frustration with this weasel. He spent thousands of dollars a month of company money, coding it to company expenses, at Sam's Club on groceries and big-ticket items for his house, on top of his already generous salary. Then to top it off, he actually took her to court for the stapler throwing incident. After hearing the story, the judge dismissed the weasel's case and made a comment to the effect that if he were in the same position as her, he probably would have done the same thing. Used to sell cars at a major dealership. The unofficial sales contest was to see how much over MSRP they could sell the car for by confusing the customer on the price with payments and financing, manipulation of trade value, and sometimes outright fraud, like promising manufacturer rebates then not applying them. The winner, quote-unquote, for the 2 months I was there was over by $10,000, selling a car that should have been about $20,000 for over $30,000. The sad part is, the customer might never even know because they still got the payment they wanted. Please do yourself a favor and don't shop solely based on payments, and if you are financing, then make sure you are aware what the final selling price of the car is. There is a major difference between $400 a month at 60 months at 0% interest and $400 per month at 84 months at 0.9%. I used to work at Frisch's as a hostess, busser, drive-thru attendant. That place was filthy and corrupt as heck. No one in the kitchen wore gloves, and the cooks loved making people eat old food or food that had been dropped on the disgusting floors. The manager loved to steal the waitress's tips and blame the customers or the sketchy-looking bussers. The most corrupt thing the awful manager did while I was there was around Christmas time. He would take $100 out of each of the new/younger employees' cash drawer, call your parents saying that their kids stole the money and they needed to be brought in to be questioned. When I went to work the next day, I found out the same crap happened to a few of the others. We all got angry and snagged the key that locked the box to the camera controls, rewinded to the following day, and watched until we saw the jerk start doing his thing. Every single one of us reported him. He got insta-fired. It was glorious. TLDR, Frisch's is gross and my old manager was a corrupt jerk. I worked for a vet in Vancouver and I ran a whole month of raffles, nail cuttings for donations, and pet pics with Santa for the SPCA. When we added up the last of the money from the month, I put it in the safe. The practice owner's wife deposited the money and bought herself some new Chanel makeup. What the frick? I quit in disgust. We have a roach problem, and gnats are everywhere. Customers can see the gnats flying around the salads, fruits, and pies we have out, but I guess it doesn't disgust them enough to not come back. More than a few times, customers have complained about bugs in their drinks that ended up there after they died in our ice machine. The worst was a live cockroach in someone's salad that was on the fork as they went to take a bite. Whole cooked turkey breasts and roast beefs have been dropped on the floor and served without any of the managers and employees giving two craps. I've realized most restaurants are so much more dirty than shown, but I've eaten out my whole life. I guess my consolation is that I'm probably building up some immunities to all the ickies out there. I used to work for a local children's charity where a good majority of the money was skimmed to pay for the owner's for-profit business. I worked for a popular national pet store chain. We told our customers that we got our puppies from, quote, reputable breeders and not puppy mills. We got them from puppy mills, and I can't express how many came in on the back of a large, pitch-dark freight truck, malnourished, scared, and sick. We also adopted the cute kittens from the local shelters and charged customers outrageous amounts of money, most of whom just felt bad for the kittens. Don't support national chain pet stores that sell puppies that do not come from local shelters, folks. If you want a dog or a cat, then please adopt. Or find a stray, take it to a vet and adopt him or her. Also, donate whatever you can to local shelters. Food, toys, beds, money, etc. They could really use it. I just want to say that if you have ever worked at a water park, it will turn you off of visiting any kind of public pool or park for the rest of your life. The things we pulled out of those filters, man. No. Just pour so many chemicals into the water that literally nothing can live in it and call it a day. Macy's doesn't donate anything to charities. They practically force their employees to and claim it as company donation. I worked at Dairy Queen. The collection box supporting children with cancer hanging out in the drive-thru window was a discontinued charity. My manager pocketed all the donations. Disgusting in a different sense. Back when I was a warehouse manager for a major office supply chain, one of my duties every month was to gather items from our inventory that were selected by corporate to be donated to local charities. All items would be collected, scanned, placed on pallets, and loaded onto the trucks to be delivered to the charity distribution center. After a few months, I started to notice that some of the donation items that should have been shipped out mysteriously ended up missing or being used in my general manager's office. I later discovered that on the days that the donation items were collected, my manager would send me out for lunch and revert the scans on whatever donation item he desired in order to keep it for himself. I eventually caught him in the act as I returned early from lunch, and needless to say, he was not able to come up with a good excuse. Instead, he insisted that I take my pick of whatever I wanted from the pallet. I was so disgusted that I immediately put in my 2 weeks notice during the busiest time of the year and filed a complaint with corporate. My last job, we held events and refilled premium liquor with house crap. And during events, charged consumption tabs with 100 plus people, extra shots and bottles that were never ordered so the event holder can pay for something never even used at the end of the night. And that's just scratching the surface. My boss refuses to hire anybody but white women, and he uses rubbing alcohol to wipe the expiration date off of product if it expires. He just puts it back on the shelf, including dairy product. I hate him. For reference, this was 9 years ago, so hopefully he's been fired at this point. This happened years ago, but I was a receptionist for a chiropractor for about 6 months. One day, our first appointment came in. I went in the back to look for him. I walked in on him screwing a coworker on the table, the same table the patients sometimes would lay face down on. I went back to the front and said, "He'll be with you in a couple minutes." God, I was disgusted. He was married with 2 young kids. I didn't work there long after that. Worked store security. There are peepholes above the ladies' changing rooms at several major retailers. Supposed to be for female security agents to monitor the dressing rooms, but we had no female security agents. Lots of creepy voyeurism / self-pleasure going on. Private company I no longer work for. The company list of vehicles included 2 4-wheelers, a Corvette, a Hummer II, a brand new Jeep, and oh right, a 20-foot fishing boat. Also frequently bought company furniture which he would then sell to himself. Government contractor and a weasel. Okay, this really took off and I'd like to clarify a few things. If you have a small business and your cars are company cars and your office is in your home, power to you. Starting a business takes a lot of work. The main problem that I had with this guy was his general selfish nature and lack of respect for anyone. I can't go into details, but there were 2 big projects going on at the company at the same time. One under the government was defense-based, the other, which was an invention that he held the patents for, was aerospace. He used every trick in the book to siphon the government contract money into the private project so that he could reap the benefits, generally treated employees like dirt, and was just such an unbelievable jerk. I recently worked for another government contractor and my boss there was nothing less than stellar. Using a throwaway. The company I worked for had to maintain a trust account where money owed to clients was kept and then they were paid out of it. There was a small lag of about 30 days between when the money came in and when it was sent to the client. This was a highly regulated industry. For more than 3 years, the company hadn't been paying their clients and had been fudging the books. I found this out when I was told to stop sending reports that showed clients were owed money. I pressed management and found out they had been lying to clients for well over 3 years, and one client was owed $1 million. I should also point out that in this particular industry, this client was in the top 3 in the nation. We're talking about thousands of companies owing tens of millions of dollars. I was instructed to lie to the clients until they were so fed up they threatened to sue the owners, then they would get paid. This was common knowledge in the business. It was openly discussed with customer service. Until I filed a formal complaint with the regulatory agency, none of the more than 100 employees had ever reported them. Not one. And I know why too. After I gave proof to the regulatory agency and quit, they swooped in and seized the company books. And all of my allegations were true. Instead of filing criminal charges against the executives involved, the regulatory agency just fined them and then made them pay back the missing money to the trust. No one was charged with the crime, no one lost their job, no one was put on probation. Absolutely nothing happened to those responsible, and the only consequence is that they have to have regular audits. Screw the government. I worked for a gelato shop that made us dig through the so-called recycling bins to fish out used plastic cups and spoons to wash and give to new customers. Even if the spoons had bite marks from other customers and were coated in chewing gum, we were told to wash them up and only had to throw them out if they were really unpresentable, because these things are expensive. Furthermore, all the other stuff in the recycling bin that people so good-heartedly placed there, yeah, all of it got thrown in the dumpster. Customers ate it up and told us regularly how glad they were that we were a green business who cares about the environment enough to recycle. It didn't take long before I just couldn't keep doing this with a clean conscience, and I turned them into the health inspectors, who were obviously horrified that this was happening. About 2 months later, I got laid off and the business closed its filthy doors forever. They leave sites like Reddit unblocked just to see who is slacking and fire them. One of the few benefits of performance-based jobs is that as long as you're getting your crap done, you can throw that right back into their faces. A few years ago, was working as a call center drone, and the boss of my boss sent me an email regarding the amount of non-work related internet usage from my computer. I just sent him a metric spreadsheet showing that I was, by far, his most productive employee. Didn't even write anything in the email. Never heard anything else about it. I worked as a supervisor at a water park, and just before inspection by the owner, the director had me go around the park and paint all the rusted metal silver to look like new. Some of those bolts were nearly rusted through and were crucial to the ride's construction. Valet here. I've seen a number of occasions in which rubbing compound was used to cover up mild to moderate scratches. Coworkers have stolen things out of cars, from spare change to a handgun on one occasion. If valet is an option, don't do it. Just want to add, I've never stolen anything out of someone's car. Also, yes, all valet companies are different, just like not all restaurants spit in your food. I valeted my car one time. I thought, nah, they won't steal my stuff. Wrong. They stole lots of stuff. I used to work at Victoria's Secret. We are required to refund and take back any used underwear as well as everything else in the store. It would then immediately go back on the sales racks even if it had obviously been worn. I showed my manager a used pair of pink panties that had a disgusting smell that resembled tuna, and she advised me to just spray perfume on it. I didn't quit immediately because I needed the money. Instead, I would grab a pair of scissors from the back and accidentally cut the ones that I knew had been used, so they had to damage them out and not sell them. I work in designer clothing retail. The clothes are quite expensive, and the assistants are required to only wear full-price garments. So we, the whole team, just pick clothes off the rack, wear them all day, including lunch and bathroom breaks, and at the end of the shift, replace the tags and put the clothes back on the shelf for the customers to buy at full price. I know I was grossed out my first day there. If you come into Geek Squad with a computer under warranty, we are required to at least perform a $70 diagnostic on the computer before sending it out for repairs. If viruses are detected, that price goes up to $190 for the removal. I have had to remove viruses from a client's laptop and then send the laptop off to get the hard drive replaced. Also, $30 RAM installations are per stick of RAM. Seriously. One time our department was doing poorly in sales, so they brought in a specialist to give us an after-hours training session. He opened up with, if anyone is stupid enough to walk through those doors looking for a repair, they deserve to be charged $189 for it. I hated that place. In the store I work at, the warehouse is a complete fire hazard. The electrical boxes are screwed, and things get thrown on them all the time. In the way it's set up, if there was a fire, we'd be boned. There's wood by all the ceiling sprinklers, which would absorb most of the water, and pretty much all our fire extinguishers are several years past expiration. I'm highly considering calling a fire marshal. We can see you. I look after instant photo booths remotely. I see all your stupid faces, all of them, every day. I changed the name of a sushi roll from the Ultimate Roll to the Miami Heat Roll and raised the price to $17. Instantly became the best seller. That's not disgusting. That's marketing. Kudos. And this happens all the time. It's genius, not horrible. Take a look at what bars do. They'll have a special drink in which they have taken another drink and renamed it for double the price. After graduation, one of my roommates from undergrad went on to the University of Texas at Austin to do a master's degree in advertising. At first, he was super excited because the program there at UT was the best of its kind in the country, and he really liked Austin. However, by the end of it, he had totally changed his outlook on advertising and actually ended up going into a different industry. Apparently, his last semester there, the students in his program had to do an internship with a real company and help them come up with an advertising campaign. One of his friends at the program was really excited because he had gotten his internship with Jack Daniels. However, their view on advertising was completely shattered when his bosses at Jack Daniels literally told the guy to go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and figure out what they would have to do to get those people drinking again. I once worked for a small retirement home that was owned by a church. I was the night watchman, and during the night, I could smell the odor of feces wafting down the halls. Everyone could. And the nurses at the nurse stations would typically wait until their mandatory rounds times to deal with it. So they basically let residents lay in their fecal matter. I'd say about 10% of nurses actually give a dang about the residents. All the other ones are just there to get paid. I will never go into a nursing home. Okay, as somebody who's worked in elder care for a while, let me explain. There is no such thing as truly great elder care in a retirement home. Unless you pay a crapload of money or go into a 24-hour facility in Thailand or the like, because there you get one-on-one care. There's decent care, where the patient's basic needs are met and they're cared for the best that the understaffed nurses can manage. And then there's awful care, where the old people are lucky if they get their diaper and urine bottles changed more than once a day. It's not possible to give people with dementia or impaired bodies all the time that is necessary when you're understaffed and underpaid and are barely able to rush through the important stuff that needs to be done. You've got women and men crapping themselves at least 3 times a day, and if you're really unlucky, it's the same person every time, and you run out of clothes for them to wear and stick them in a nightshirt, and that is, of course, the first day in 3 months that the relatives decide to visit and get angry because why is their mother, father, or uncle in bed before tea time? Which is all fine. It happens. You deal with it and move on. But every time you need to change somebody or clean somebody or help somebody to the toilet, it throws you back between 10 minutes and half an hour, and that's time that some other patient would have needed. And what you can't finish isn't picked up by your colleagues because they're equally behind. Because you're 5 people for 35 patients and they all need at least 3 hours of your time, which is 2.5 more hours than you can give them. If you're lucky, you gave everybody the right pills and the right food and the right kind of diaper so that they won't get open sores on their butt. And if you miss something ultra necessary, you better hope the next shift catches it. Because if not, it's you on the line, and the excuse Mrs. X pooped her pants and put her hands down her underwear and smeared it on the wall of the hallway and I had to do damage control is not going to fly with anybody. And let's not even get started on what happens when a medical emergency happens, because instead of running to the MRSA infected patient who's been in hospital 3 times in the last 2 months and has been dying for even longer, you walk slower and are relieved when they're dead, because now they won't have to slowly wither away in pain. I worked overnight dairy at Walmart for a few years after I moved, had 7 years total with the company, and hated every minute of it. So in the dairy, we often get returns, stuff that has been left out in the store, and it's our job to put it back up. No thought is given to how long these things have been left out. They're put into a cart and wheeled into the cooler. It doesn't matter if it's a gallon of milk that has been sitting out 5 minutes or 5 hours. It goes back into the cooler and probably back on the shelf. This is done in the name of expediency, which is what drives every policy at Walmart. Things don't get done right, they get done fast. So with milk, if a dairy employee finds it outside the cooler, it probably goes on a return pallet, because we know better than to put room temperature milk back in the cooler, and the store gets a refund on milk we send back to the milk company. Not so with regular employees, who, as they are trained, put it in a basket, wheel it into a cooler, and hand it off to the next guy, who probably is getting crap from his manager to get this stuff back on the shelf. Eggs? Eggs come in with general freight. They don't do returns on eggs. Once again, if a dairy employee picks them up, they probably get ditched in the giant bin of milk, eggs, flour that sits outside the cooler and ferments and smells terrible, but at least it's a good 5 feet from the candy bins, so it's not like any cross-contamination is possible, and never see the shelf. However, same thing as the milk. It could be sitting out for a week. It'll get put on a cart and wheeled back to a cooler, and someone will yell at someone else until it gets put back on the shelf, because nobody likes getting yelled at. While working there, I came down with food poisoning on at least 3 occasions, none of which I was allowed to go home. I walked out on the 3rd after I puked in a mop bucket, told my manager about it, and then found out that mop water, which was probably a day old in the first place, was used to mop the cooler because nobody ever told the employee on duty to change the water. This is ignoring their terrible policies regarding how they treat employees and train management. Don't buy food at Walmart because it might be cheap, but you're getting what you pay for.
Parents, at what point did you realize you raised a monster? Hello, this is the story of my son Felix. I am from Sweden, so I am sorry if my English is bad. Felix is 6 years old and Julia is 4 years old in this story. I can start with an incident that made me wonder how I raised my son. So me, Felix, and his younger sister Julia were on a camping trip through the north of Sweden when my son, from nowhere, just starts to scream, "I will kill you, Julia!" And after he starts to pray to God. No one in my family is religious, and that is what makes me uncomfortable. I ask him, "Felix, what's going on?" And he answers, "Julia wouldn't let me play with her hair." The whole trip I would always check out what Felix was doing because I could just feel his anger of something. I couldn't put my finger on what until 5 years later, 2017, when the same thing happened again. Me and my wife had just picked up the kids from school and let them play upstairs while we're cooking food, and then from nowhere we hear the loudest scream saying, "I will kill you, Julia!" So I ran upstairs as fast as I could. When I came up to my room the kids were playing in, I saw my daughter laying on the floor bleeding from her hair, and beside her, my son is sitting praying to God with blood on his hands. We're so confused, my son had pulled so hard in his sibling's hair that she had lost hair and started bleeding. That is the most creepy thing I've seen in my life so far. When I ask my son what he has done, he answers me with the most chilling voice I will ever hear. "Julia wouldn't let me play with her hair, Dad." About 2 weeks after the incident, I asked Felix why he pulled her hair. He said, "The man in my head tells me what to do. I can't choose what to do." My son is getting help and my daughter is fine. I had to buy security cameras because he was stealing, throwing parties, doing illicit substances in my home, etc. He looked right in the camera and flipped me off while I was at work. My heart fell. I'll ask my 18-month-old if she poo-pooed and she'll smile and say, "Yeah." Then when I put her on the changing table and take off her diaper, no poop. This makes me laugh because the kid isn't a monster, but they've found a surefire way to get attention anytime they want it. And you can be sure they're going to use it. Not my kid, but my partner's adult sister is a real handful. A panoply of vaguely diagnosed mental illnesses, including bipolar and psychosis. She's on income assistance, which helps. But she goes from morbidly depressed in the winter to wildly high in the summer. We let her move in to get herself out of debt, which she did, but now she's back in another hole. She picks bad boyfriends, the last of which we had to get a restraining order against after he threatened our children when we extricated her from his abusive grasp. The worst part is that the cycle is never ending. It's been this roller coaster for 20 years, and we're really, really tired. She's 14 for life, and not the good kind of 14-year-old. Big sister here. My brothers were fighting yesterday in the room beside mine. I'm hearing everything for 20 minutes straight. I'm having a cold and therefore wanted to see if they could resolve it first. The older brother is constantly using his strength, he's strong, fat, and tall, to taunt the younger one, but the older one is a wimp who will sit down if you demand respect. The younger one is even more of a derogative word for a female reproductive organ. I don't really condone using this word, but seriously, that is what he is. This younger is the middle child. They still don't break it up after 20 minutes. I go in there, throw the older one out of the room. He gets out, not before he hits him again. I had surgery on my leg a while ago and still in recovery, so really in no shape to get between them unless I want my other leg to break. The older gets out of the room, then suddenly the middle one gets the courage to beat him up when he's out of the room. I do not touch him but block his exit with both hands to the side of the door. This little psychopath uses all his strength to push on my hands and I almost fall to the floor. He knows all the pain I've been in from my surgery. I get mad and tell him to stop acting like this, and if he really had the courage and wanted to beat the older one up, he should have done it in the 20 minutes before and maybe earlier. He starts taking his anger out on me, and I've had enough. My headache is so bad at this moment, I close the door and lock with a key by force. He gets out the window and gets in the house via the balcony. Now this is where his horrible and outright scary personality comes to show. Keep in mind he's only 13. I tell him, what is he doing? What does he want? He talks to me condescendingly and tells me just to go back to my room. I'm always in my room, and just tells me to shut up. He starts threatening and speaking to me as if he has any power over me. But the scary thing is how calm and poisonous his tone is. He isn't affected by any of the words I'm saying and has zero respect to me as a big sister. I'm not demanding any respect, but he doesn't have that love and care we other siblings have for each other. I've always started to notice how he says whatever the heck he wanted and then makes it into a joke with a cheeky smile. When my dad was going to visit grandma, he told the rest of the family, "He's just waiting on grandparents to die, then he'll be back." I mean, who the frick says that? This was a bit much, but the road my brother is headed on is not a good one, and I'm truly scared for his future. I tried to be a good mother, really, I did. But looking back, the deck was pretty stacked against us from the start. Me and my son grew up poor, and I mean really poor, in the back end of nowhere, and I had to work all the time. I was basically a slave. I certainly got treated like one. For childcare, like I could afford that, I used to leave my boy with the owner of the local store. A fat Jewish guy I got to know, and he did his best looking after him in exchange for the little guy helping out. I suppose it was child labor, but what can you do? One day, I got lucky when some rich out-of-towners suffered a breakdown on the edge of town and came into the store looking for help. They were really impressed by my son's resourcefulness and know-how, and they were obviously upset at his potential being squandered. So they offered to fund his education. The only catch was that it would have to be at a boarding school because there was no schools nearby worth a damn. I knew I would miss him like hell, but this was his big chance and I jumped at it. But when he came back, gosh, how he had changed. The next time I saw him, I'd been kidnapped by sand people, and my sweet boy, who wouldn't hurt a fly when he was young, killed every single one with this lightsaber some idiot had given him. Men, women, and the children too, and he slaughtered them like animals, shaking my damn head. I won't lie, when I got to the punchline here, I was equal parts livid and exasperated. Well done. Well, I had to read it, and now you have to listen, subscribers. Have fun. Love, the narrator. When my youngest moved out, I had always had difficulty with her, but once she was gone, I realized how much of a bully she is. Recently, she got angry when my partner told her to not guilt-trip me, and flipped out and called him scum of the earth, telling me I am a bad mum for being with him when he is so awful to her, saying really horrible things about his children. The thing is that my sweetie is incredible, and everyone loves him, except her because he called her out on her bullcrap and stood up for me. I can't even tell you how many times I've cried because of things she's said or done. My oldest daughter is a sweetheart, and they are polar opposites. I'm concerned there are some mental health issues right now because she has increased her behaviors. Unfortunately, she's off on her own, so I can't do anything but ask her to talk to someone. When she looked me dead in the eyes and poured out her cup of orange juice on the ground. It's age-appropriate boundary exploration, but still monstrous. My son asked me how long he was obligated to interact with me. Well, if you're forcing him to spend time with you, that's a valid question. True. Hated it when my mum would force me to do something I don't like. This seems like a common parenting mistake. Parents start feeling their child is too distant, so they make the whole problem worse by insisting that their child stop doing everything they enjoy and instead do something they hate with their parents. Camping trips, card games, etc. In reality, all this does is reinforce to the child that the parent doesn't care about them. If parents really wanted to grow their relationships with their kids, they've got 3 options. Learn about their hobbies, and see if they're receptive to talking about it and/or doing their hobbies with you. If your kid plays a video game, try playing that video game, etc. Show your kids your own hobbies to see if they're interested. Maybe you play guitar or something, and that piques their interest. If not, don't force it on them. Learn to be okay with having a healthy distance between parent and child. If you squeeze too tightly, they'll want to rebel. Make it clear that you respect them and their boundaries, and then you'll have a much stronger foundation to build on once they're out of their rebellious teenage years. My son steals my wife's eyeglasses while she is reading on her phone. She can see up close fine, but anything past 3 feet is a complete blur. He knows this and knows he can get away with taking things off counters and drawing on things if she can't see him. He's 3. When my son's Tamagotchi died, and I was sad because I realized I was the one taking care of it while he was at school and in bed. He abandoned his own Tamagotchi? F him. That's how you raise a quitter. This kid better be taking care of that Tamagotchi whether he wants to or not. Oh my god, he obviously needs to be sent to military school. We may have veered off topic slightly here, I'm just loving how hot and bothered the community was getting over proper Tamagotchi treatment. My sister is raising 2 monsters, my niece and nephew. The whole family knows, even their parents know, but neither of them wants to be a parent and discipline or give consequences for their monsters' actions. My nephew at 7 yelled at my sister at Subway when she asked him to pick out his chips. He screamed, "Shut up, you B-word! I want to frickin' choke you!" He then proceeded to kick the customer nearest to him in the back of the leg. My sister just laughed it off with a defeated, embarrassed look on her face. At my daughter's 3rd birthday party, my niece, 8 at the time, realized she was wearing the jeans she doesn't like, screamed over the birthday song at her parents, and told them to fix it immediately. Well, they couldn't, they had no change of clothes. She flipped out, grabbed the birthday cake, and threw it on the ground, then ripped her pants off, threw a present on the ground, and stomped all over it. No apology, no consequences. My sister offered to pay to replace the gift. I told her I'd rather she pay to send her kids to therapy. She called me a C-word and said I didn't love my niece and nephew. They're in their teens now and still throw fits if you don't do what they want or let them win, etc. When my brother had his son, Monster Nephew started beating him up around 3. Monster was 9. Monster gave the little boy a black eye. This was the only time he ever got his butt kicked, and after that it stopped. And the only people my monster niece and nephew are genuinely scared of and behave around are my African-American sister-in-law and my Mexican brother-in-law. They've never done anything to them, they're just not white. Anyway, we have secret family get-togethers without inviting them because they always ruin them. We honestly don't like living like this, but we also don't like spending X amount of hours listening to them whine, complain, and scream, and demand things while breaking and destroying our property. And you can't say anything to them and their parents won't say anything. It's upsetting. I dread their future. Not a parent, but a sibling. My sister has become a vain, selfish, unloving sociopath. She treats my mum as a slave, and my mum loves her too much to notice. My mum was talking to her, she got bored and said, quote, "You can leave now." My mum replied with something like, "You can't talk to me like that, you need to respect me," to which my sister replies, "I have no respect for the B-word that cleans my knickers. Leave." I'm in shock. If I said that to my mum, I'd be slapped, but she turns a blind eye to my sister. Not my son, but there was a kid in the playground that my kid was playing with. He was about 5 or 6. If he didn't get his own way, he started screaming and hitting other kids at the playground. I advised my son not to play with him or talk to him since he was being a little crapbag. I didn't say that to my kid. The kid's mum was in the playground, but ignoring her son and loudly playing Pokemon Go. That kid is likely going to turn into a monster, seemingly since he is ignored. My daughter wrote F you and Mama dies with her figure scratched on a piece of paper the other day when we wouldn't let her make lemonade. She's 8. She's gone on rages and destroyed her room before, including throwing furniture around. Not looking forward to her as a teenager. She's in therapy, right? Yes, under medication too. She's much less ragey than she used to be, but catch her when she's tired or in transition and it's still hit or miss. I feel bad for her, and you. I mean, we blame people with mental issues for being jerks, but that's like blaming a sick person for being sick. They need help and we should give it to them. Good job being a trooper. I dated someone who was a terror as a child and even as a young adult in my earlier life. She is a very sweet and well-adjusted human being now. One of my best friends with a child of her own. There is hope. I do hope the kid gives her a run for her money. It's only fair. I was in court as a plaintiff waiting for my case. They did all the criminal stuff first. One of the cases was this high school senior who had beat the crap out of his 100-pound, 5-foot mum. She was crying as she was refusing to have him home on bail. She was scared of this kid. This was an upper-middle-class family, and the kid looked like he was on his way to a good college. She kept saying he did it every time he didn't get what he wanted. Judge sent him to Monmouth County Jail, not a nice place for an 18-year-old skinny Neebish. Just imagine what's going to happen to him when his fellow inmates find out what he's in for. Oofed. This thread has been a real inflictor of whiplash between the funnier ones and the ones like this. Okay, I need a laugh break, so here's a funnier story. Not the parent, but a brother. When he went to the bathroom and practically fumigated the entire house. The only room that was safe was the basement bathroom, with the door shut and the fan on. He was laughing his butt off for over an hour. Ex-teacher here. My own kids are far from monsters, but I've met some. When I taught preschool, there was a kid who was banned from YMCA camps for his behavior, and they never banned someone before. He brought a plastic, thankfully, knife to school and threatened to cut all of us teachers. Told other kids he would burn their homes down after first setting fire to all their toys. He heard me calming another student who was afraid of bees and mentioning I'm allergic, but I've never been stung because I don't scare bees. He came up, told me he was going to put a wasp nest in my car, lock me in it, and watch me die. He was one of only 2 students expelled from that school in the 15+ years I've been associated with it. His mother still didn't realize her son was a monster. She said she ate lead paint when pregnant with him, but claimed he was just fine. Often parents just cannot or refuse to see their children for what they are. Not a parent, and I won't ever have kids for obvious reasons, but I was the monster. I'm not proud of what I've done, but I can't change the past. I lived with an abusive father who often beat my mother, my sister, and me. He was abusive, physically, beating us, and mentally. My mother said it started when I was 4 months old. My mother always tried to protect us, but wasn't always there. I lived in a home filled with hate and violence and never really learned what love or happiness was. I was a pretty violent child with a lot of anger issues. My mother told me I would often hit my grandmother or her, and when my sister was born, it was even worse. I hated her and wanted her dead because since she was there, I couldn't have nice things anymore. I was 3. I was the kind of child to throw a tantrum because I was not given the present I wanted for Christmas. When I had rooms full of toys and I would throw myself on the floor and scream or even hit people and break items, then act as if everything was normal. It took a turn when my best friend passed away. I was 6 and started being fascinated by death. I pushed my sister in the stairs and tried to kill her a few times. Now, I could have been helped if my mum had accepted that I had a problem, but she refused to think something might not be wrong. With the death of my friend, I was forced by school to see a psychiatrist who realized something was wrong and asked to see me again. I never returned as my mother just didn't want to face the truth. Growing up, I had a lot of anger issues and sent a few of my classmates to the hospital, but when questioned, I didn't remember what happened. It was around 16 my mother realized something was really wrong. I had an argument with her and hit her, then came back a few minutes later and wondered why she was mad. A few days later, my father had cornered me while I was doing the washing up. I grabbed a knife, and if my sister didn't see it and reacted, I know I would have stabbed him, even if I don't remember it. I remember my father screaming at me, but not the knife part. When I realized something was wrong, I asked to see a psychiatrist who told me I had an illness. Now I've changed a lot and seem like a normal person. I'm 23, really close to my sister, and I don't have anger issues anymore. I don't see my father anymore, and things seem to be good, except I don't really have feelings. I never did, but I still know what I did was bad. To all the parents out here, if your child acts in a way that is not normal, bring them to a psychiatrist. It's not something to be ashamed of, but someone that is ill won't change by himself. I'm not a parent and likely won't be due to medical conditions, but I fear my younger brother will likely turn into a monster. He's a self-entitled, uncaring, sociopathic, and frankly, violent little prick. He gets away with not doing his homework, playing video games constantly, and refuses to help my dad and I out with stuff. He doesn't do chores and is a lazy butthole. My dad, Lord save him, and I are at our wits' end. A little over a year ago, he threatened to slit my throat in a violent, anger-fueled rage, after hitting me over and over again, punching me in the stomach, and hitting me with a wooden dowel. After I told him to get off his game and do his homework, or I would turn off the internet until he did his homework. He's told me before, on many occasions, that he wished I was never born, that I should have died instead of Mum, who died 2 months prior to this, and that he hates my guts and wants me to die. He told me that if I told our dad, he would kill me and my cat in my sleep. When he was younger, he trapped my oldest cat, who's now since passed on due to old age, underneath the porch and didn't let us know until we found her 3 days later, alive, hungry, and dehydrated. He's thrown my youngest cat in the mud because he was bored and she was annoying him. He threw a book at our elderly dog because the dog was whining and being annoying. He has no care in the world but for himself and his 1.5-year-old cat. He's a monster through and through, and I dread the day my dad finally comes to his senses and sees what kind of monster we've had living in our house. Despite the grimness of this last post, posts like the next one give me hope that perhaps cases like this can be fixed. Not a parent, but the monster, I guess. Well, I got my crap together since college, but that was a crazy crap show before that. When I was really little, I used to not respect anyone, and I didn't understand any boundaries. For example, I destroyed everything that annoyed me and tortured little baby kittens to see how they react. Drowning, for example. My parents tried to teach me how to be responsible with living things, but it took 3 dead cats until I understood how to handle living things without murdering them. I really liked war and destroying stuff, painted weird stuff everywhere, peed into the plants in my room, and built weapons to destroy stuff. I also liked to hurt and terrify my classmates for fun. Went through some therapy, but it was mostly homeopathic crap and giving me those weird alcoholic drinks to calm your kid down. In secondary school, I spent a lot of time harassing the weird kid in our class that had no friends with a group of weird screw-ups. We were perverted as hell as well, and did a lot of dumb stuff in general. I started getting into video games in that time, and I thank God for it saved my insane butt, because in college I made friends through playing all day, and they helped me to understand how normal people behave. Now I got my act together, have tons of friends and a good job, and soon a pretty frickin' great girlfriend. But knowing what's normal and what's not is still a huge problem, especially in areas people don't talk much about, which always gets me in bad situations. I really don't know what my parents think of me, to be honest. They generally talk little and never told me I am proud or anything like that, which I understand, to be honest. I guess they are just happy I'm working on my crap. They could have told me earlier though. I mean, to this day, I had to work out my problems alone. They never talked directly like, hey, you've got to take care of these things. Maybe they don't want to accept the fact that I am indeed crazy.
People, what is your strangest glitch in the Matrix moment that cannot be explained? When my son was about 4 years old, one night he started hounding me to ring Nana. He had never asked to call her before, so I just put him off for an hour or so and he came back and insisted that I call her. Turns out she was sitting on her lounger experiencing a massive tachycardia event and couldn't breathe. I called an ambulance and met her at the hospital. The same week, she had a pacemaker and defibrillator unit implanted to fix the problems. To this day, I cannot explain what drove him to get me to call, but I'm very glad he did. He doesn't even remember it. I don't know why, for the life of me, but it just took me 20 times to clearly say he doesn't even remember it. This happened to people I know, not me directly. A woman who works with my mom was out doing her grocery shopping one night and ran into me at the supermarket. She told my mom about the encounter the next day and asked why I didn't recognize her, as we saw each other once every few weeks when I'd go and help with any heavy lifting at their store. My mom confirmed that it couldn't have been me as I was at home. The woman also mentioned feeling oddly nauseous during the interaction. I was about 16 or 17 at the time. Another woman I know said she didn't know I walked through the park near her home after work. Dumbfounded by her observation, I listened as she explained that she'd seen me every so often after work, walking briskly through a large park, which I do know of but have only driven past, as if I was exercising. She said I walked close by her the previous evening and she was going to speed up to catch up with me and say hello, but as she started to, she began to feel ill, so she slowed down and then sat on a bench for a few minutes. By then, she'd lost sight of me. This happened about 3 years ago, and both occurrences were miles apart. I can't believe I forgot about this, but it happened when I was 20. I was living on campus on the ground floor of a 3-story building. There were only 36 people in the building, so I knew everyone by sight at least when this happened. A new guy moved into the 3rd floor. We'd exchanged pleasantries, and I knew his name and what floor he lived on, but not much else. I was coming out of the front door one morning, and he was coming down the stairs and said, "Oh, I just saw your sister going up the stairs." I asked him what he meant, and he said, "Your sister? She's here all the time? She wears her hair the same as you?" I used to change my hair a lot. At the time, it was midway down my back and fire truck red. There was nobody on campus with hair like mine. I noped out and went back inside. You know, it might be hard to accept for some people, because I know we live in a time where everyone likes to think they're a special little snowflake, but some of us just have that face, that body, and even that sense of fashion. You just look like a lot of people. I stopped at a gas station on my way to work one morning. I take out my debit card and take my car keys with me and leave everything in the car. Pay for my stuff and throw my debit card in the metal cup I have in my car. Literally half a second later, I look down and my card is gone. Pulled apart everything trying to look for it and couldn't find it. I go to work and go home to find it sitting on my desk. Double check my bank account to make sure it was the card I used, and it was. To this day, I still have no idea what happened. I mean, I can't explain that either really, unless, you're a liar. Saw a dude with no face driving a car. No features at all. It was just blank. I did more than just glance at him. I was staring. Just smooth skin and a men's haircut. I've never told anyone because it's so ridiculous sounding and I don't think people would believe me. Probably a rational explanation for it, I suppose, but man, what the hell? Maybe some kind of prankster or whatever trying to freak people out or something, or maybe you were doing something you shouldn't have been doing while driving. I've posted this before, but my family go to a garden center near my town every winter. Pretty Christmas lights. Well, this one year, the day before we were supposed to go, I had a dream that on our way, the tire of the car came off and we crashed hard. It was such a horrible, graphic dream. My mom's leg had been crushed, my dad stuck, etc. Well, I told my mom in the morning and she joked that she'd checked the wheels. She actually must have. She said the car had felt weird and the dream unnerved her. Lo and behold, the tire is loose and needs to be taken to a mechanic. Really weird experience, especially as I've never had a dream feel so real before. Well, you know what they say, with great power comes great responsibility. Now come over to my house and dream up some winning lottery numbers if you would be so kind. Once I walked into my living room from the hallway, saw my mum in the kitchen pouring a bowl of something fully clothed, important to the story, and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" She ignored me, put something in the fridge, and walked into her room. I figured she didn't hear me and walked into my room. Not even 2 minutes later, she walks into my room, soaking wet, in a towel, and tells me she had fallen asleep in the bathtub and had just woken up. Weirdest crap ever. That sounds pretty believable, actually. Year 3 or 4 at school in the UK, so I'd have been like 7 or something. Anyway, at the end of school we all had to line up in our year groups in the yard and we would be led by our teacher to the front of the school and either onto the bus or picked up. The pathway from the back to the front of the school was narrow, so all single file. I was walking along, chatting and laughing with my peers in front and behind of me. Next thing I know, I'm stood on the path, completely alone. The teacher comes running back from around the front of the school and says, "Greg, hurry up, you'll miss the bus." I'd literally missed/skipped a few minutes of time. I've always remembered it. The answer is simple, my friend. We are nothing more than sleeping slaves. Diavolo is doing whatever he be doing in Italy and using King Crimson all over the goddamn place. But in all seriousness, this has happened to me as well. I've blanked out going from point A to B and had no recollection of my journey to point B. It's something that happens. People just go on automatic sometimes. But it certainly doesn't change how jarring it can be. Not the strangest, but the most recent. Early last month, I went online to pay a bill, like I've done for years. I get to the last page before finishing and the web page freaks out, with a multitude of display issues before finally receiving an error message. After several attempts to pay, I give up, assuming the site is having issues. I go back 2 days later and pay my bill, and it goes through normally, with me getting my usual text and email notifying me I paid. I'm very confused a few weeks later when I check my email and find a notice from the company whose bill I paid with a semi-threatening email saying the bill is due that day and do I need to set up a payment plan. I've been dealing with the company for almost a decade and have never been late in paying. I check my credit card account and there's no record of me paying, nor are the text or email I received still in my records. I pay the bill and chalk it up to a senior moment on my part. Last week, I got my one credit card bill. It says I never paid my last bill, so now I've got that bill to pay plus the interest. I find my previous bill open but with the invoice in place in my living room. Here's why I'm posting. I'm physically disabled and can't drive, and I always pay that credit card bill in person after they messed up my payment years ago. A family member always takes me to my credit union to pay that bill, and like me, he remembers us going down to pay the bill. They say I never paid. He and I even remember a conversation we had on the way to the credit union and going grocery shopping afterwards, but yet the bill is unpaid and the bill is in my possession still. I don't know what to say except that credit card unions can be tricksy little rats. We'll call them rats. In my area, there are apiaries. An old girlfriend and I were driving down a backcountry road exploring the area, and we both saw an old lady in dark clothes tending to a few beehives in an open field not far from the road, maybe 50 yards or so from the road. She was covered in bees. I slowed down, the bees covered the woman, and then the bees all flew away and the lady was gone. There was nowhere she could have vanished to or hid, and we both saw it happen. Answer: that was no little old lady tending that beehive, that was the pain from Metal Gear Solid 3. When I was 23, I went to a week's workshop with uni abroad to Barcelona. The workshop was based in an obscure part of the city, and I always thought I'd never be able to find that area again. Fast forward about 15 years, I score a job in Barcelona, get off the plane, go to the hotel near my new office, and it's across from said workshop. I worked there for 3 years, and when that job ends, I move country again for about 5 years. About a month ago, I was invited to an interview for a job, which I'm now in the process for, and guess where the offices are? Yep, around the corner from the workshop that I thought I'd never find again. It's got me wondering if it's coincidence or should I just move to that area until I work out why the universe keeps sending me there. This is probably my favorite one so far. The universe just sending you back to a specific place, like in another country regularly, is just kind of cool. Woke up one morning, went into the living room, and there was a pile of at least 100 maggots in the middle of the living room. Fat fuckers, too. No idea where they came from, or perhaps more disturbingly, what they had eaten to get that size. Well, that would certainly freak me the hell out if it was the first thing I woke up to in the morning. Wife and I were driving out of Texas to come back home to Ohio. We stop at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Kind of a run-down little place. Wife goes in while I'm filling up. I finish and pay at the pump and decide to head in and use the restroom real quick. I walk out and the wife is at the checkout paying. Wall up and the guy just starts looking at me and then calls me out by my full name. Lieutenant? Yeah? Your name is Lieutenant Drinks-A-Lot, right? Yeah. Do we know each other? Nope. Then how do you know my name? I don't know. Wife and I look at each other and we both get the hell out of there. I don't have a common name. I had never been to that gas station, let alone that town in Texas, ever. Every time my wife and I think about it, we can't explain it. Now, I've never worked a register, but I think that maybe when he paid to fill it up, it may have come up with his name if he paid by card at the pump, so the dude just took a shot in the dark and was like, oh, this is that dude. I don't know how he'd know that he's a lieutenant, unless I know that you can get different titles on your debit and credit cards and whatnot, so I don't know if lieutenant is an option that you can have or something. It's the most rational explanation I can come up with, that's for sure. After a bath, I went to put clothes on, blacked out and woke up on the floor, sitting upright against the sink and dressed. I have no idea what happened. I didn't feel sore anywhere like if I had fallen over, and it was as if I sat on the floor and dressed myself while I was unconscious. Felt like 20 minutes had passed, even though the bathroom still had steam in it. Kinda just shrugged it off, but I'll still think about it. You probably just got up too fast, you silly cow. I'm not the kind of person to have a great many friends, but those friends I do keep are sacred to me. So one evening, I'm getting out of a Rotterdam subway to go to my apartment near there when I see an old friend, one I haven't seen in the flesh in a few years, heading into the subway. I call out his name. He turns, waves, and makes this call me gesture. Then the doors close and subway rides off. 30 seconds later, my phone rings. It was my friend who told me he'd just seen me getting the normal train he'd used to get home from the bar. Apparently, I had grinned, waved, gestured, call me, the doors shut, and the train drove off. I lived in Rotterdam, he lived in Enschede. Well, looks like more doppelganger shenanigans are afoot. In high school, I remember going to English and the teacher did roll call. She called my name and I raised my hand and said, "I'm here." Then she stopped, saying, "So, he's not here then?" My friend and I laughed because I was obviously here. Figured she was messing with me. That night, my mom got a call telling her I wasn't at class today. I was actually marked as absent. I go back to school the next day and tell my friend, Mrs. English teacher actually freaking counted me as absent. And he said, "Why wouldn't she?" Thought to myself, you're not funny. But I just let it slide because I thought again I was being messed with. Then one of my friends sits down and asks, "You feeling better today? Or were you just playing hooky?" I was so confused. Then I go to my first hour and that teacher hands me the work I supposedly missed from that day. I looked in my bag and had the same stuff, guide and assignments already there. To this day, I don't know if I missed that day of school or not. I like to think that the teacher and the students, your friends, were conspiring against you to mess with you really badly. About a couple years ago, a friend sent me a video and he asked if I had a lost twin somewhere. It was a video made by amateur actors from the city I used to live in. There was this girl that looks just like me. She talked just like me and her part on the sketch consisted of telling a joke I used to tell at the time. I was freaked out of my mind. For some stupid reason I deleted that video and I haven't been able to find it anywhere. And God knows I spent an embarrassing number of hours trying to confirm it even existed in the first place. I kept this one in just as an example of a stupid one that I absolutely don't believe. And believe me, there are already a few that I'm very skeptical of, but some of them are pretty cool. Senior year of high school, 30-minute lunch. My buddy and I drove all the way from my school to McDonald's, normally about a 10-minute drive, so 20 minutes minimum there and back. But we stopped by my house in between the school and McDonald's. I grab a shirt, change, leave, drive down the street, get into an altercation with a guy who we flipped off for tailgating. A shooty bang bang is pulled. We think he was across the street. Looked like a shooty bang bang, but who knows? His wife in the passenger seat starts yelling at him. We part ways. Go to McDonald's and order food, eat in the parking lot, decide we are late regardless. We had no access to the time in my car and our phones were in our lockers at school. We also were frequent ditchies or tardy kids. Turns out this all occurred in 18 minutes on the dot. It's freaking impossible, but it happened. My buddy and I still talk about it to this day, saying we went through a wormhole or some crap. Or my Nissan, rest in peace, somehow could time travel or slow down time. Time-traveling Nissan is not nearly as cool as a time-traveling DeLorean. I was at a gas station getting a coffee. I absolutely love gas station coffee, and this was somewhere I always stop before heading to work. I went to pay for my coffee and I tapped my card. The lady at the till tells me it was declined. I try inserting it with my PIN because maybe my tap wasn't working. The lady said it was declined again. There was no one else in the gas station at that time, so I'm like, hold up, let me check my online banking. Because I'd just gotten paid and I knew I had money. I go to my online banking and it says that I paid. I show her the transaction and she starts insisting that it didn't go through on her end. Like, okay lady, I'm not paying for the same coffee twice. Next day, I go in to grab another coffee and the lady tells me that I stole the coffee the other night, but doesn't make me pay for it. I am angry because I just got a lecture when I know the money for the coffee came out of my account. I checked my online banking later and there was no transaction for the coffee. Not so much a glitch in reality as it is a glitch in your bank account. Biking back from school one day with a friend and we were talking when suddenly I got a really strange case of deja vu. I remembered the exact moment as if it had happened once before and knew what he was going to say next. Then he said it. Nothing mind-blowing, but more than 14 years later, I still can't explain it. See, I would explain that by saying that the friend was probably talking about something that you were only passively listening to before, but now that you were actually focused and subconsciously aware of what they were talking about before, you kind of knew what they were going to say next. This happened to me several years ago while I was living in California and working a great job in a downtown coffee house. I loved everything about that job. I worked with fantastic people and our shop was located in the city's historic district in a very old, very beautiful building that had once been a hotel in the 1800s, but had since been converted into apartments, lofts, and of course, the big coffee house on the main floor. Being an early birdie and living only a couple blocks away from the coffee house, I was always scheduled to work the opening shift, which started at 4:15 a.m. It was the most unpopular shift, but it happened to be my absolute favorite one because I loved walking to work in the quiet of the early mornings as the rest of the city was sound asleep. Normally, downtown was quite loud and busy, full of people and constant activity, but in the early hours of the morning, it was still and silent, and I felt as if I was the only person in existence walking through a ghost town. Every day, I arrived 10 or 15 minutes early for my shift and would wait for my manager on the patio outside of the shop. It was always just the two of us working that that early shift, and my manager was often running a little bit behind and never arrived before I did. But I didn't mind at all. I liked to spend some time by myself on the patio outside of the darkened shop, gathering my thoughts while I waited for him to walk up with his keys to unlock the door. One morning as I was walking to work and approaching our building, I noticed that the coffee house was brightly lit up as all the lights were already turned on and shining through the store's giant glass windows. I was about 10 minutes early that morning, so I was very surprised to see that my manager had arrived before me and had already started opening up the shop. I walked up to the glass door and pulled on the handle to let myself in, only to find that it was locked shut. That wasn't really unusual, as we often kept the doors of the employee entrance and main entrance locked while we got everything ready for the day and went through our morning procedures until 5 a.m., which was our official opening time. What was unusual, though, was the sound of music I could clearly hear drifting through the speakers inside the store. This was during the holiday season, so we were playing Christmas music throughout the day. But on this particular morning, I could hear the Christmas music already playing its familiar loop at a rather high volume inside the store. This was during the holiday season, so we were playing Christmas music throughout the day, but we never turned it on until around 9 or so in the morning, out of respect for all of the tenants living in the apartment above us. But on this particular morning, I could hear the Christmas music already playing its familiar loop at a rather high volume inside the store. I thought it was odd, but decided that maybe my manager was just feeling extra festive that day and wanted to listen to some tunes while we worked. I knocked on the employee's entrance door and waited for my manager to come and let me in. I looked through the glass and watched for him. He didn't come, so I knocked again and waited some more. He still didn't appear, so I knocked again and again. I then walked to the main entrance door and tried knocking on those with no luck. I checked my watch and saw that I had 5 minutes until I needed to clock in. I knocked again, much louder this time, and looked inside through the glass door for any signs of my manager, and that's when I heard the muffled sound of voices coming from the back of the store where the kitchen of our coffee shop was located. At that quiet, early hour in the morning, every sound seems to be amplified, and what I could distinctly hear was 2 male voices talking and laughing together. That was very unusual, as I had mentioned before that it was normally just me and my manager who opened up the shop. But I figured someone had probably just needed to pick up an extra shift. I knocked yet again and continued to listen to the sounds coming from the coffee shop. The men kept talking and laughing loudly. They seemed to be having a really great time. In addition to the music and the talking and the laughter, I began to hear the sound of clanging dishes and also the spray of the 3-compartment steel kitchen sink being turned on and off, which was very, very unusual, as there would be no dishes to wash before the store had even opened. I was also confused as to why the manager and whoever was with him were in the kitchen in the back of the store, because so much of our opening procedures, setting up the pastry cases, brewing the coffee, preparing everything for the espresso machine, were done at the front of the store, where I was waiting to be let inside. At this point, I was getting a bit irritated, as I was supposed to start work in just a few minutes, and I needed to punch in on our time clock. I hated clocking in late for work. I dug out my phone and dialed my manager's cell number. He didn't pick up, so I dialed the number to our coffee shop instead, and the 2 phones inside the shop, one in the back office and one up the front by the register, started ringing. Once, twice, 3 rings and no answer. Now 4 rings and 5. I hung up and I immediately dialed again, annoyed that they were making such a racket in there with the music and all the talking and the laughter that they probably couldn't even hear the phone at all. Just as before, nobody answered. I hung up and redialed the store for a 3rd time. The phone rang and went unanswered, and so I banged on the door yet again to no avail. I looked at my watch, and I was officially late for work. As I was standing in the front of the locked door with my phone against my ear, becoming more and more irritated, I noticed a pair of headlights reflecting in the glass rolling up behind me. I turned around and saw something I did not expect at all. It was my manager. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said as he climbed out of the driver's seat and shut his car door and hustled up to the shop's entrance. "I tried to get here as fast as I could," he said as he moved towards me and fumbled with his keys trying to find the one to the shop door. "You're mad," he said. "I can tell. I'm really sorry." Completely confused, I put my phone away and turned to head into the store with him, and that's when I lost my breath for a minute. The coffee shop was totally dark. None of the lights were on, not a single light, and it was dead quiet. The Christmas music had stopped, and so had the voices and laughter. All of the loud noise had disappeared. Every sound I had been listening to just seconds before had suddenly vanished. "I promise I'll be here on time tomorrow," my manager said as he fits his key into the lock. "I'll even be early. You'll be shocked." Little did he know that I could not possibly be more shocked to see him than I was at that very moment, as he opened the door to the silent, completely empty coffee house. Perhaps another individual with a deep love for creative writing.
What hobby is an immediate red flag? Those people who post prank videos on social media. I know someone who does this and it's absolutely a red flag. Same goes for people who base their entire social media presence off getting views and likes. For some reason, I forgot these people exist in the wild. They shop, drive, and are just out and about. Scary stuff. I always assumed people who did this would be normal in real life, but the person who I know who does this type of thing does a lot of the obviously staged and gimmicky videos, which are super cringy. You might expect them to be attention seeking, but it's actually worse. It's more so that everything is an opportunity for content, and it's like a switch they cannot turn off. There is zero living in the moment. Not to mention major social climbing and obsessing over how many people with blue check marks follow them. Absolute clout chaser. Every person they met, they immediately ask for their Instagram handle because every person they meet is an opportunity to gain a follower. This person is entitled and only sees people for what they can get out of them or use them for. They're very manipulative and obsessed with their image. This using people mentality carried over to personal relationships. In my case, the person I knew was having a full-blown affair with someone they knew that was married, and said that they simply didn't care if they were being a bad person. We're not friends anymore. My husband's best friend from college is a YouTuber who has 800,000 subscribers. Used to be a really cool guy, but if it doesn't create content for him, it's not a priority. He bailed on our wedding last minute. He was supposed to be a groomsman to go do some stupid video with another famous YouTuber. Definitely a red flag. The constant drive for likes and subscribers is toxic and gross. We all graduated to college over a decade ago, and the dude still acts like he's 19 years old. It's kinda sad. At first, we really respected him for blazing his own trail and doing his own thing, and getting out of our hometown, but he's just like every other douchebag influencer on Instagram now. Well, this kinda hits close to home as someone who is a YouTuber. I will say, over the years, I have caught myself getting swooped up in the content life and chasing the numbers, but I don't think I've ever done it at the expense of someone else. I absolutely hate prank YouTubers and met plenty of clout chasing creators as well. These posts were completely accurate about a decent number of creators in this space. Posting everything, and I mean every single thing, on social media. Knew this one dude from work that did this crap all the time. It was annoying as hell. Unfriended him when I was scrolling through and saw that he posted a selfie of himself on the toilet and used the caption to say, "Poopin'." Animal fighting, dog fighting, bird fighting, using dogs to kill cattle, wanting to see an animal kill another animal at your own amusement, non-documentary of course, seems like a big red flag to me. What about roaming the world unsupervised as a preteen, capturing wild animals in small enclosures, accosting passerbys and demanding that they use their animals to fight your animals? Pikachu, I choose you! Wasting your time arguing with random people on the internet, especially if it's baiting. Well, I disagree. Stalking women and collecting their photos on a mural. That's oddly specific. Oh boy, this one guy, friend of a friend, wannabe photographer. Our friend in common approached me asking if I wanted to do a photo shoot with her. I agreed because I thought it would be fun, and I met him before in social settings. They weren't unclothed or anything, it was all very artsy and not sexy. One thing I found odd was that he asked to do a few headshots afterwards. They had nothing to do with the photos that we had been taking, but I didn't say anything. Fast forward a few months, and the guy and I got closer. Platonic, I was already dating my current partner. He invites me over to look at some footage that he recorded for a project I was doing. I got into his house, everything was normal for a bit. Well, we were talking about my project, and while doing so, he walked over to his kitchen, and I followed him absentmindedly while chatting. Then I stopped dead in my tracks. He had headshots of maybe 25 different girls taped to his fridge. Mine among them. Some had little marks made with markers. I recognized 2 of his exes, and a girl I knew he had cheated on his last girlfriend with amongst one of the marks. He noticed I stopped and turned around. He didn't really say anything about it. I snatched my photo and my friend's off the fridge and left. Later, a guy that knew him confessed to me and my friend that the guy had essentially a hit list of girls he wanted to hook up with. He lived in a small town, so most of the girls he wanted got pictures taken by him. It's been a few years now, and from time to time I remember the dread I felt looking at those pictures, with him just standing a few feet away.
I felt like I was in a horror movie. This sounds kind of like a setup for one of those stories where he ends up killing everyone that he hooked up with. And they end up finding that he has this box filled with little resealable bags where he puts locks of their hair. Or like toenails or something. I don't have any friends that are creepy as that guy in this post, but this story did unlock a memory of mine from a time when a former friend of mine used my phone to search up a girl we met at our job. He ended up saving a bikini pic of this girl and sent it to himself. I would find this out later when my girlfriend at the time was using my phone, and while we were driving, she questioned why I had a bikini pic of a hot girl saved in my photos. As you might assume, this started a huge fight, and there was no way my girlfriend was going to believe my friend was the reason I had this photo. You still suck to this day, Dave. Saw this post yesterday about a guy that uses real mouse hearts and testicles to place them in clear resin cast of Lego men. I don't know what that is, but it's a red flag. Adopting too many kids or animals, especially when you can't afford them. One word, gambling. Casino dealer here, it's almost never a hobby. One of my peers who had a successful career in the medical industry started playing poker religiously a couple years ago, completely out of the blue. As soon as he wakes up, he starts gambling on multiple applications on his phone. He plays every evening, whether it's with friends or just random people. He started with no to low stakes and has worked his way up to higher and higher stake games. He used to be interested in live music, art, gaming, and he would hang out with friends when gambling wasn't involved. He had to move back in with his parents and stop buying herb, a 24/7 habit he had since he was 10 or 12. Not sure if that was related to his addiction of poker, but he won't say why he had to give up so much recently. But still, all he talks about now is when he's going to the casino next. From living in Vegas, I see a pattern of people having bad poker nights and then going to less skill-oriented games to make the money back. A $200 loss can become a $5,000 loss in a few minutes. I used to work at a slot machine casino. It's exactly how you said in that last sentence. Same guest would come every day and complain about the same damn thing. How much money they lost in the last couple of days. Granted, it is smaller amounts than $5,000, but the fact that they complained and still came back the next day was pretty alarming to me. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed to interfere or suggest a break from the casino, unless they came to us or that we saw a crazy change in their behavior. Even worse, we weren't allowed to even talk to them much because our boss said that we were interfering with their stay. It's sad that something that's literally made to be fun is sometimes someone's only income, or debt. You see people fade away spiritually and physically, and you can't do anything about it because the company wants money. Family vlogging. They completely violate children's privacy. Using kids to shore up your own online presence is not okay. There are parents that are pimping their kids on OnlyFans, Patreon, etc. I watched 2 videos the other day exposing people that can buy exclusive picture sets of several 8 to 14-year-old girls who are prominent on TikTok via parent-run accounts. They showed the metrics and their viewers and buyers were like 75% male, between the ages of 23 to 47. Freaking insane. The pictures were blurred in the expose, of course, but the pictures were said to be sexy bikini pics of little tween and teen girls. Disgusting crap. As a person with a kid who didn't even really want kids even, it absolutely blows my mind how easily some people exploit their own children. Like, that is your baby. How screwed in the head do you have to be to put money over their privacy, safety, and dignity of your child? I don't even post regularly innocent family photos of my kid on social media. Outside of like sending direct snaps to my dad or uncle, I'm far too paranoid about the kind of people that might see them. Even though I'd like to think I'm not friends with anyone that would look at my daughter in a predatory way. Damn, that just makes me so freaking angry. When you have a kid, your entire purpose for the remainder of your life is raising them to be the best version of themselves they can be, and protecting them from evils of the world best you can, not sacrificing them to those evils to make a quick buck. Holy crap. Much like prank YouTubers, I've never really been a fan of family vloggers. I've seen a couple, even met Shay Carl once at a convention and he made a video for my sister. Some can be nice people, but I can't ever shake the feeling that there are so many people that want to see other people's kids. Like, scripted television is one thing, but reality TV and online videos that involve kids' daily lives is just weird to me. Collecting blood slides. My friend had one next to his table next to his AC unit. When I asked him about it, he gave me this weird smile and claimed it was for work. I've never had beers with him since. Surprise, mother. If a person is preoccupied with their social media and they don't actually live and communicate in the moment, it's fine if you can communicate about it and make arrangements, but I'm not dating a person in a three-way relationship with Mark Zuckerberg. I would totally be fine with a person that has a heavy social media presence for work, but I would want to be able to set boundaries that work for both of us on it. Yeah, my sister-in-law talks about influencers as if they're her friends IRL. I can't have a conversation without her taking her phone out and showing me someone she followed before they got famous. It's exhausting and honestly awful to talk with her. Her husband, my brother, has suggested she see a counselor about it and believes she genuinely thinks in her head that she knows these people. That, my friends, is what we call textbook parasocial relationships. On a date, casually thinking, well, I guess there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? 4. What? There's 4 ways to skin a cat. Influencing. Back in 1990, we had them. They were called commercials, then infomercials, then the crap became ridiculous. It's such a disturbing phenomena. Was in line at a touristy ice cream shop near me and the line was probably 20 people deep. 3 women approached the counter and asked for samples of various kinds. It was their turn in line, so fine. Next thing you know, one whips out her cell phone and starts making a live video on how they just discovered this place. They spent the next 2 minutes sucking their samples off mini spoons for their fans. People were still waiting in line and we were just like, get out of the way. They never actually ordered anything. For me, these women epitomize idiocy of influencing. They never actually discover anything, but pretend they're the first person to experience things. It's so fake. Yeah, I hate these types of influencers because 1, they do come off as fake, but most importantly, 2, they ruin a lot of awesome places. Like, I don't like the idea of gatekeeping, but sometimes we should gatekeep certain places. And I don't just mean chill, delicious food spots. TikTok and Instagram have definitely ruined a bunch of cool nature spots because this location is a great place for your next photo shoot. Ugh. Someone reading a ton of philosophy can easily be a very good sign, or a massive red flag depending on what specifically they're reading so much of. Shrines to people. When I first met my now late significant other, my son wanted to be sure he wasn't a killer and protect me. We were literally neighbors, so one day we walked to his house and my son said, "Let me see you don't have any pictures of my mom with X's on them." He thought my son meant pictures of his exes. Nope, my kid just wanted to be sure that there was no shrine of me somewhere with my face crossed out with Sharpie markers. Running an MLM or being an admin, aka dictator, of a local area Facebook group. Dude, I'm one of the mods for our local Facebook gardening group. So much drama in what I thought was a peaceful, calming hobby. Yeah, I see a lot of dictators in a few groups I've been in, but I feel like it's probably due to how crappy the members of the group are, most of the time, rather than them actually wanting to be jerks. I have dated 2 horse girls in my life, and they both ended up very similarly. Arguing with strangers on the internet. Not like usual discussions or anything, just taunting people because you're bored. My mother does this, goes on Facebook pages specifically geared towards things she dislikes, messages them big, long, nasty grams, then blocks them before they can fight back. And yes, my mother is freaking exhausting. This post is funny because I actually made it a goal this year to stop engaging with ridiculous people on the internet. I still have conversations with people, but the moment name calling or belittling begins to happen, I'm out. My mute and block buttons are also used now because I don't care if it's a sign that the other person won the argument if I use it. If you feel validation from winning an argument online, that says more about you than it does me. So I have no problem letting people think that. Kid beauty pageants. I dated a girl in LA who had taken part in beauty pageants going back to when she was a kid. She had a good amount of success with it, and she was most certainly a looker. But man, she was completely crippled with anxiety. Those pageants freaking mess girls up that start young. There's that famous gif of that girl giving a mischievous double chin smile. She ended herself at the age of 16 pretty recently.
Those insane pageant moms are living vicariously through their daughters, the way belligerent sports dads live vicariously through their sons at baseball games. Not that it's an excuse for their behavior, but I think the pageant moms and sports dads have massive insecurities about living up to the conventional standards of femininity and masculinity, or are in denial about their own internal insecurities. So they become obsessed with forcing their kids to live up to an ideal they couldn't obtain themselves. And a lot of those kids also aren't going to be able to either, or even want to live up to these incredibly specific standards of masculinity and femininity. I'm pretty sure beauty pageants for little girls and teens just simply shouldn't be a thing. I remember reading an article about a girl that won a beauty pageant, and then it was revealed that she made a spicy video so she would be able to pay for the cost of that pageant. I think they stripped her of the title, and I don't know what happened to her after that. Watching gore or sending gore videos to their friends. I had a roommate like this. He started watching all kinds of gore and pain Olympic videos. It gave him some sort of superiority complex since he became desensitized to gore, and he would always try to get me to watch those videos with him. Likely so I would be grossed out and he wouldn't, as some sort of alpha move or something. Fast forward a month and I found our other roommate lying in a pool of blood on the bathroom floor, barely conscious. Where was our super alpha Chad roommate at the time? He ran out of the room and slept at the neighbors, leaving me to keep our roommate awake while the paramedics showed up and eventually mop up all the blood too. The one roommate lived, and the last I heard, he's doing well. The other guy, he can go screw himself. I'd make a bet that that guy was an average Joe Rogan listener. What about lewd anime figures? I get liking anime, but when your room is full of jailbait anime girls in bathing suits and lewd poses, there's something that's not so chill going on there. Shopping at conventions with the "I have to be able to shamelessly walk into my parents' house with it" rule is surprisingly challenging. There's always so much fun when your previously G-rated, or so far PG-rated, fandom suddenly sprouts a niche offshoot which has a scantily clad anime girl as a central figure. Because you just know that if you ever mention the fandom to anyone ever again, they'll look it up and the first result will be one of those pictures. I used to live in Japan and we would semi-regularly end up at the mall for some food, break a bill, and get change. In Japan, the lowest paper note is about $10. So all the coins would go to ice cream, then with whatever I had left, I would take it to the arcade and try to win the lewdest, crudest anime waifu figure I could. One of my friends thought I actually wanted one and got me a Nami figure as a gift. I wasn't going to not display it, but it was hilarious to explain what the story was every time somebody new came to my house. I kind of want to give my 2 cents on this topic because there was a lot of people going back and forth in the comments on this one. For full transparency, I'm a weeb and I would totally buy one of those lewd figures because no joke, the quality and design of some of those things are insane. They just so happen to be lewd. But I do find it funny that people would consider it a red flag, but a house full of alcoholic paraphernalia, substance paraphernalia, or even weapons wouldn't get as questioned as much as lewd paraphernalia. But I will say, if like a majority of someone's collectibles are these figures and they're lolly based, then I'd say red flag. If their identity is surrounded by Disney, sorry, I said it. I had a cousin who engineered a massive split in the extended family by having her wedding at a Disney World in Florida. She expected everyone to fly there from around the country and stay at the resort itself. A bunch of the family members opted out entirely because of how expensive it was. She ended up feuding with even the family members that did show up but ended up staying at cheaper places in Orlando. I was fortunate enough to be too distant of a relative to even get an invite. I remember seeing an I Am the Jerk post where a bride and groom were both into Disney, so they convinced everyone to fly out to their wedding at Disney and then proceeded to not provide food or drinks for anyone. Instead, they paid like $3,000, it may have been more, I can't remember, to have a guy in a Mickey costume be at their wedding and force their guests to pay for the expensive food/drinks from nearby vendors out of pocket. They were rightly judged. I'd like to add that if a person's personality is centered around any one thing, it's a red flag. Gun bros, substance heads, car people, foodies. Basically, if all you can talk about is one subject and nothing else, that's totally a red flag. Crypto, NFTs, and listening to Andrew Tate. Adults who are really into experiencing child-oriented entertainment in public. The 40-something-year-old guy hanging around Chuck E. Cheese by himself. Not necessarily the odd bird who collects kids' toys, although that is a bit strange to me too. Okay, I'm feeling personally attacked from all the people coming after toys. First off, they're collectibles. But in all seriousness, I think people enjoy collecting things from their childhood or experiencing things from their childhood because it was a simpler time. Because let's be real, when you have to really look at the world and notice how everything is so messed up, it's nice to just go home to things that make you feel nice. That's it for this video. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Link at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. It's linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you guys next time.